Americans.
We welcome Boston Common Golf. For those of you who didn't know golf had teams, you're not alone. We'll get NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey to explain what this new team is all about. It's all ahead on the first hour of Boston Public Radio 89.7, GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. Federal agents continue to expand mass deportations in raids across the country, so far arresting more than 3,500 people. Immigrant rights groups are stepping up their resistance. NPR's Adrian Florido reports.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement and partner agencies have reported raids in Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, San Diego, Miami, and many other cities. ICE says it's targeting potentially dangerous criminal aliens. Its press releases highlight arrests of people convicted or wanted for crimes like extortion, homicide, domestic violence, and narcotics violations. But advocates say it's also getting people who pose no threat. In Atlanta, activists reported immigrants with pending asylum claims were rounded up. In Puerto Rico, the ACLU said ICE had detained people with legal status and no criminal history. Advocates have filed a raft of lawsuits to try to slow the deportation dragnet. Adrian Florido, NPR News, Los Angeles.
President Trump has issued 4 new executive orders involving the U.S. military. One calls for the Pentagon to deploy a missile defense system to protect the U.S. from aerial attacks. Another ends diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the armed services, as NPR's Ayanna Archie reports.
In the order, Trump said, quote, "No individual or group within our armed forces should be preferred or disadvantaged on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, color, or creed." Pete Hegseth, the newest Secretary of Defense, has about 3 months to show the Trump administration all the Defense Department's current DEI programs and offices, and 30 days to submit a plan to achieve the mandates in the order. The order also stops the military from teaching gender ideology, or that the documents America was founded on are racist or sexist. Last week, the president signed an executive order cutting DEI programs from the federal government and placed employees in those offices on paid leave. Ayanna Archie, NPR News.
One of the president's new orders says transgender and gender-fluid individuals are, quote, unfit to serve in the military. Investors are watching tech stocks closely. They took a dive yesterday, a reaction to reports that a Chinese company developed a competitive AI model called DeepSeek at a fraction of the cost compared to American models like ChatGPT. NPR's John Ruich reports from China there's a caveat.
DeepSeek says that it spent under $6 million to make this thing. That's tiny relative to the hundreds of millions of dollars that others are investing, even billions. But analysts say that low figure is easy to misinterpret because it doesn't include, for instance, the cost of developing various versions from which this latest version was distilled.
Shares of chip company NVIDIA lost nearly $600 billion in market value yesterday. This is NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu and the mayors of 3 other sanctuary cities have been asked to testify at a February 11th hearing on Capitol Hill to answer questions about not cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. We have more from GBH's Tori Bedford.
In a letter, James Comer, the Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, asked Wu and the mayors of New York, Chicago, and Denver to answer questions about their refusal to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. He called the policies, quote, misguided and obstructionist. On Boston Public Radio this week, Wu held a strong line that Boston does not enforce federal immigration law.
Our police department takes care of criminal activity, and they focus on local issues. And whenever someone breaks the law, we hold them accountable here, regardless of their immigration status, which we do not ask about and we do not interact with.
Wu has not yet confirmed if she will attend the hearing. Tori Bedford, GBH News, 89.7.
Josh Kraft, the son of New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, has filed the paperwork to run for mayor of Boston. Kraft currently runs the philanthropic arm of the family business and has formed a campaign committee with the State Office of Campaign and Political Finance. The filing is his first official move towards making a run for mayor and challenging Mayor Michelle Wu at the same time. Bruins are shuffling off to Buffalo tonight for a game against the Sabres. Clouds, maybe some snow squalls today, high near 40 degrees. We are at 36 outside our studios in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Marjorie Egan is a little bit under the weather. She's going to be back tomorrow on Zoom at the library. Sitting in is Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety for the Commonwealth. How are you, Andrea?
I was just walking down the street and you literally snatched me off the sidewalk.
Thank goodness for that.
And dragged me in.
That's what we do here. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At noon, we have a rather odd noon thing. Roger Berkowitz, who is not odd, formerly Legal Seafoods, now of Rogers Fish Company, has brought along clam chowder. Well, actually not clam chowder, double clam chowder, and he will be sharing it with everybody here in the audience and us. We're looking forward to that at noon. But first, President Trump has a penchant for fear-mongering. And we said on the show last week we were going to try and focus on the things he's done that have real consequences. So today we're going to focus on the hundreds of billions of dollars Trump has ordered to stop flowing through our economy. Through executive order, the White House Budget Office has ordered a pause on all federal loans for things like state grants, disaster relief aid, education funding. We're talking Pell Grants, SNAP benefits, almost everything. Let me reiterate, virtually all this money was approved by Congress. Those are legislators the American public voted in office. Trump has consolidated enough power that he's decided to govern by Sharpie. Then there's the gender war he's waging, banning transgender people from the military through an order that declares trans people unfit for service because their identity automatically means they, quote, cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service, even though they have. And by the way, has he looked in the mirror lately on that front? Then there are the pardons. Then there are the illegal firings of independent inspectors. There's with the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, from the Paris Climate Accords. Our question today at 877-301-8970, call or text, how much are you willing to take before you take a stand? What community will he have to target before you feel the compulsion to do, let's say, anything? And what about our Democratic leaders? How are you feeling about their response, such as it is so far? What would you like to see them do? The number is 877-301-8970. You, Andrea, based on our conversation this morning, with a little bit of history thrown in, are not shocked by the, let me call it, the non-response of the bulk of the American people who are not happy, those who are not happy with Donald Trump. Is that correct?
Not surprised at all.
Why?
I mean, just if you look historically, where, sort of fascism has marched into countries, people have sort of sleepwalked toward it. And I think that the lessons of that have clearly been learned by the Republicans. I personally believe that at the point at which Americans were, pleading to do something about guns, where like 70-something percent, 80-something percent of Americans were saying our children are being shot in their schools, people are being shot at supermarkets and synagogues and churches. Do something about it. And Republicans said, not only are we not going to do anything about it, we dare you to make us pay politically, and they didn't pay politically. That was probably one of the most seminal lessons in American democracy for any political party to learn. We can do what we want. We just have to keep stiff-arming you, and eventually you'll stop asking. Because when was the last time, and there have been all these subsequent shootings, when was the last time you heard the hue and cry that you heard from Sandy Hook and other places? And that's the lesson that they've learned. You just keep doing it. Do it hard and fast, wear them down, and they'll wake up one day and they'll think this is how they should normally live.
I unfortunately think I agree with you, and I hate to generalize, but let me generalize. And this is a random observation, but I am on social media more than I should be. I think the passivity with which the vast majority of people who I follow, and many of whom I respect on all these things. I mean, let me give you, Ed Markey has an interesting quote in Politico today, who is, I think we'd agree, sort of an activist United States senator, and see if you think this is fantasy stuff. Donald Trump is going to create a reaction in our country to his climate denial policies that will be massive, says Ed Markey, by the end of the spring. I wish that were true. I have seen nothing to suggest that something that Donald Trump does on the climate front, because he's done a lot already, including telling the people in California whose lives have been destroyed, by the way, you'll get your money, assuming you do what I want to do on election reform and water reform. What do you think of what Ed Markey had to say?
Well, I think Ed Markey is being optimistic. I tend to agree with you that it is going to take, and this is sort of the topic of our talker, it is going to take people feeling real pain. And that will come. I don't know if it'll necessarily come by spring, but it should come fairly quickly. I mean, Ed Markey might be right. I just don't have a lot of hope for that right now. I will say this. The one thing that defines all government, but federal government in particular, is constancy. There is a reason why every president before Donald Trump has maintained things like grants and loans. There's a certain level of functioning of federal government that both parties have historically agreed needs to continue to support the people who are governed. He is the first one to come along and say, I'm not only going to just bully other countries into doing what I want, but I'm going to take things away from you. I'm going to starve you into doing what I want. I'm going to bully you into doing what I want. And until people wake up to the idea that he is no different than Scott Farkas from A Christmas Story, that he's going to bully them into doing what he wants them to do and push back on that, he's going to keep doing it.
But
that's
see,
what bullies do.
I think a lot of people have come to that realization already, but I think there's a lot of been there, done that kind of thing. We lost this election. We didn't do so great in the first round of Trump, even though Trump was defeated by Joe Biden. I think there's a resignation. I hope I'm wrong, by the way.
Right.
I think there's a resignation level that is like palpable. You can almost feel it, kind of thing. I don't like this. I don't like this grand stuff. I don't like the end of the well, you're going to talk about this a little bit later, the civil rights actions from the Justice Department. I'm going to talk about later, the fact that he's approved, and I'm not exaggerating, friends, that it's okay to release poisons into our waters. I don't like it. But, you know, I can't fight anymore. And maybe it's not going to be quite as bad as he said. And then those who support him, and remember, almost 50% of the people voted for him, I think are, you know, if they disagree with the policy, their attitude is it's not that big a deal because he's going to help us with the economy. And then when the economy isn't turning around on day one, as he said, they'll make an excuse for that too. So I think there's almost a total resignation by everybody. Trump supporters where pledges are not being honored, Trump opponents who are seeing essentially the federal government being torn down, and that's not rhetorical excess, from the first 9 days of this presidency, and shrugging their shoulders.
You might be right. What I will also say, and not a but, people haven't seen anything yet. And part of the reaction... You mean
direct impact on them as an individual?
Direct impact on them, the sheer volume of what is intended here. Because I've said this before many times on this show. They do not intend to give power back. They do not intend for elections to resume in what we understood to be the normal course of elections pre-Trump. The reason for starving the populace out and not providing them the things that federal government traditionally provides them is to make sure that they constantly have to come hat in hand. The people are not supposed to come before their government as supplicants. The government is supposed to serve them. They intend to destroy federal government so that that exact thing happens. And when you're constantly begging, you settle for whatever you get. That's when when we get to that point, and it will be shortly, then you'll know whether or not the resignation that you talk about has taken hold, or if there's still some revolutionary spark left in people.
Well, you know, and our number, by the way, for texting or calling is 877-301-8970. An anonymous texter says, please consider making one day a week with zero Trump. We're going to try. Maybe Trump-free Thursdays, so there's only one a-hole segment on Thursdays. Good line there.
That is a good,
by the way, it's only day 9. We are going to take a break. It's really hard to take a break when things are being torn down like this. Let me tell you, my greater fear is for those like Ed Markey who say, when, come spring, it's really going to be bad. I can see Trump in a meeting today, for example, with his key advisors, the absolutely despicable Stephen Miller and those sort of characters saying, you know, we did a lot of things that people didn't like. We pardoned people who tried to kill law enforcement people. Right. We got out of the climate accords 2 days after Los Angeles burnt down.
Out of the World Health Organization during bird flu?
No one did anything. So you know what that means, boys and girls? We can do anything we want about anything. I mean, it's like positive reinforcement for a person who is the last person on earth who needs positive reinforcement to do even more excess. In any case, 877-301-8970. And by the way, if any of you see more of a spark in our fellow citizenry than Andrea and I do, please call us and tell us we are wrong, that there's a lot of organizing and a lot of action going on, and maybe we'll even believe you. Chris in Cambridge, you are first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, guys. I am demoralized. I think it's working. You know, I am a researcher and I work as a geneticist, and I'm just really bummed to see the delay in federal funding for grants. And I do think it's going to have major impacts in Cambridge and Boston if it lasts for long, because we have tons of universities that rely on this funding to do this important work. And it's not even the most depressing thing that happened yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw the PEPFAR program, which distributes HIV medications to Africa and prevents countless deaths. The estimate is maybe 25 million deaths over the next 10 years will be prevented by distributing those medicines. That was actually started by a Republican
George W. Bush.
president.
George W. Bush.
Got put on hold. And it seems like the infrastructure is getting canceled, even though the medicines are there already. So this is just extremely depressing. I guess to answer your question, are we having a rally Friday at the library? What's the plan? We need to let's come up with it together.
I don't know what the answer is. I am so glad you brought that up, because, you know, there's so much partisan division. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, since you know about it. I have a friend who works at the UN who has schooled me on this. And this had such huge bipartisan support, concrete proof that it was saving tens of thousands, if not millions of lives. The problem is a lot of these lives are saved in the so-called S-hole countries where people don't look like Donald Trump, and he has no interest in spending any money to help such folks. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we just learned from the pandemic for the last 5 years that it really is not possible to contain an epidemic or a mutation of a virus somewhere else. It just doesn't work anymore in the modern world. And, you know, if something happens where HIV becomes more transmissible, it means it can be coming to our shores. And, you know, in addition to mattering to those millions of people whose lives will be altered, and, you know, the children of pregnant mothers who will inherit a disease for no reason, that's completely preventable. So I think this is important to see the cruelty of it, but also to see the implications for us. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Jim.
Well, I'm so glad you started the conversation with an incredibly important bipartisan program. Chris, thank you for calling. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
I want to recommend to people two articles that are worth reading, especially if you're feeling sort of defeated and demoralized, but you want to get a better sense of what's going on and maybe sort of get your engine revving again. One is by Sasha Abramsky, who is a prolific author, also the Western correspondent for The Nation. It's in The Nation. It's called Trump's All-Out Assault on American Democracy Has Begun. So, you know, forewarned is forearmed. And also Judith Levine has a fantastic piece in The Guardian called Are Government Workers Going to Stand Up to Trump? Because that's where the purge is actually, an actual purge is actually happening among government workers, and the only qualification is loyalty to Trump. But Judith Levine has written an excellent piece. The Guardian has pledged that it will continue to write the truth about this administration. So supporting The Guardian is also a good idea.
By the way, I failed to mention when I mentioned that he had fired that dozen-plus inspector generals, who oversee agencies to make sure that there is not shenanigans. He also had his Justice Department fire anybody, including lifelong, nonpartisan people because they had some involvement in in the prosecution of the current president. Molly in Burrillville, Rhode Island. Did I pronounce that right?
Burrillville. Yeah, Burrillville.
It was easier to care a little less before I had a kid because my millennial generation has always felt like everything is on fire. But now with a 3-year-old daughter, I feel backed up against the wall. I've already read the book. It feels like we're about to live 1984. There's so much talk about trying to make a difference in your local community, but it feels like too little, too late. And by the way, this is only 9 days in.
Right.
I mean, this is the 9th day of the second presidency of Donald Trump, but it feels like it's been a long time.
Well, one of our other anonymous texters just makes such an excellent point, and it's so well phrased. We're not resigned, we're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There's so much coming out right now. There are so many executive orders. Which one are we supposed to protest against? I'm 78 and I'm ready. I'm ready to go to the street. I'm ready to pick up my placard. I'm ready to resist. But we need leadership. We need a firebrand that we can gather around. I thought that might have been Kamala Harris, but apparently not. We need somebody empowered to mount the resistance. It's all well and good for Markey to anticipate something happening, but he's got to be out there making it happen. And that's such an excellent point because the bottom line is that we didn't just vote in the presidential election. We have voted for everybody else, all of the people who are in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, people who are in our local government. It's a very good question. It's the question. Where is the leadership to fight back against a systemic, apparently easy dismantling of a multi-century-old federal government and a democracy? Where's the pushback to that?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. We'll also ask John King that question at 1 o'clock. Phil in Beverly, welcome.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Hey, the new CEO of CNN, this guy Mark Thompson, he says to his staff, let's give Mr. Trump...
Whoops.
Did we lose Phil?
Phil, you there? Phil, we'll try to can you put him on hold for a second? I'll tell you one thing they have done. The host on CNN that is the most openly critical of Donald Trump, Jim Acosta, who has he used to be the White House correspondent. He's fabulous. He has the very highly rated, which is unusual. 10 o'clock in the morning on television is not prime time. He occasionally has more viewers than prime time does. He is being offered an exiled position, the midnight to 2 a.m. shift on CNN, and reports just this morning actually are that he's leaving. He's not going to take the exile, and he is gone because, as I think Phil was about to say, the new leader of CNN's position is we are under-Trumped on our station. And by the way, let me just say one thing about that, because some people will say, and I agree with it, in fairness, you should have both sides represented. The difference between the guests on CNN, and that's my station of choice and Marjorie's too, I know you're an MSNBCer there, Andrea, is the people who support, let's say, Democratic position. David Axelrod's good position. Always is willing to criticize the Democrats if he feels the Democrats are doing something wrong. Find me one Trumpian on CNN who thinks anything that Donald Trump has done is not perfect and in the interest of the people. That, to me, is not really a debate. 877-301-8970.
I want to say something more about that when we come back, but we've got to take a quick break. We're going to do more of your calls and texts next. Hopefully we can get Phil back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL, and also streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Imani Perry. In her new book, she traces how the concept of blackness has been remarkably intertwined with another color, blue, from the dyed indigo cloths of West Africa that were traded for human life to American blues music. Plus, Tony-nominated playwright Jordan Cooper discusses Ain't No Mo, a satirical take on racism in America. Tune in for that and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Flour, Joanne Chang's bakery with 9 locations in Boston and Cambridge, delivering Valentine's Day sweets like a cake for 2 or sweetheart cookies. Orders accepted through February 9th. flourbakery.com/valentines-day. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Corbell sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie has been a little bit under the weather. She's returning, but on Zoom tomorrow. So I'll be at the library. She will be on Zoom from home. And we are streaming today and tomorrow and every day, actually, youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the 9 days of Donald Trump, this flooding the zone with essentially, I don't think it's rhetorical to say, with the dismantlement of the federal government. We're not talking about that as much as we're talking about what appears to be a lack of intense reaction from those who are troubled by that. And the question is why and what should we be doing? A lot of texters are saying things like, tell me what to do. Well, that's what we're asking listeners to do. One of the things I do, I drive through, just by chance, through Newton Center from time to time. I think it's every Friday. There's a bunch of really old, wonderful people who are peace types who hold signs around Newton Center. There are probably 10 of them. It's not probably going to change the world, but it gives a constant reminder to people that that kind of thing matters to a lot of them. And so the answer is you do whatever you can. And if you have better ideas or specific ideas, share them. 877-301-8970.
We're going to go back to our calls, but the one thing I wanted to add that makes the speed with which this is happening, and I think it's something that Phil was talking about, is that this will be the first time that the dismantling of federal government or the ending of a democracy is literally being ushered in by corporate media, the owners of media. Because I think what Phil's point was that the owner of CNN was saying, well, let's give him a chance. Well, we remember that CNN was the one that covered wall-to-wall coverage of his rallies, even covering an empty podium while Hillary Clinton was making a policy speech, just waiting for him to come on. So the need for to draw the eyes to the station, to get the advertising dollars, Bezos, the guy from the LA Times, all of the corporate media bigwigs are helping this happen. They're giving money to his inauguration. They're in his camp. So they're not going to be there necessarily to push the truth or tell the truth. That's going to come from individuals.
Well, don't leave Zuckerberg out in the end of fact-checking.
Or Zuckerberg, right.
Obviously.
Or Musk, or any of them.
Yeah.
So let's talk to Barbara in Attleboro. Hi, Barbara.
Hello, Barbara.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me now? Because I just turned my radio off.
Yes, we can.
Inauguration. Yes. Hello.
Hi, we can.
Okay, great. I'm almost repeating what the 78-year-old anonymous caller said. I'm 80 years old. I worked 2 jobs till I was 70. From the time I was 16, retired last year. I do what I can financially. I vote in every election, local, state, federal. I'm limited a little bit in my mobility. I want to do something. I don't know what to do. And I try to talk to people who are a generation or two younger, who didn't live through the 60s and 70s, and they don't get it. And I'm so frustrated.
Well, I think the answer, Barbara, this may not be satisfying, and is everybody, you do something. A letter to the editor is not going to change the world, but I'll tell you, it feels like you're at least voicing your concern about something. Write your congressperson, write your senator, ask them to join together with other senators to decry whether it's RFK Jr.'s nomination, or I know they're going to vote no, but let's do a little organizing and public education about it. Just do something rather than sit on one's hands. Well, here, Barbara, thanks for the call. Here's Frank from Charlton. If you're feeling defeated, it's because you were defeated. The American people saw what your side was offering and chose to go the complete opposite direction. And Frank, what I say to this is everybody I know has lost elections. And never before have the losers, in my estimation, say, we lost, so that means we have to give up for 2 years or 4 years. You lose. Of course you lose.
The fact that he speaks of an election in terms of one side conquering the other tells you exactly what you need to know about Frank from Charlton.
Maybe
that's
so.
Not how you view an election in a democracy. And he did not win in a landslide. It's the slimmest margin in history in terms of the popular vote. So he doesn't have a mandate. But the idea that it is seen that way is that we conquered you, and that's why you're justified in feeling that way. That's a big part of the issue.
Mary in Winchester, thank you for calling us. We appreciate you on Boston Public Radio. Hi,
Mary.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yesterday, my daughter was the program director for an the international arm of a large advocacy group for LGBTQ.
Oh, great.
Folks. And today she was unemployed. Because it was her division was largely government funded, and she has no job. So she has thousands of folks who will no longer have, and an earlier caller talked about this, but the countries that she works with, these folks will no longer have access to medical care, medication, social services, anything. And I told folks at work today, hey, my daughter has no job as of today. And I said it on purpose to many of the folks who think Trump is great. And, oh, that's so sad. Did you know that was going to happen? And I thought, absolutely. What did you think was going to happen when this man was elected? So that's what I wanted to share.
What exactly, Mary, before you go, could you give us tell us a little bit more about what your daughter did before she was fired?
She has consortiums throughout a lot in Africa, Southern Africa, and Central America and South America, where organizations with folks trying to get grassroots groups of people to offer support for LGBTQ seniors primarily. And so that a lot of the laws and a lot of ways in which they're persecuted in their own countries, where they're lifted up from that.
Wow.
Yeah,
well,
and that's happening everywhere across the country for all of those places. Mm-hmm. People have no idea the sheer volume of programs that serve people, help people, keep people alive, save people's lives, are funded by federal grants. Just to say you can no longer spend that money is a death sentence. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, for millions and millions of people, and it's happening right under our noses.
Mary, good luck to your daughter, and congratulations there for what she's done, and I hope she gets to do it again soon. You know, in the Marco Rubio, who was confirmed by a mere 99-0, former senator from Florida, obviously now the Secretary of State, his first pronouncement was to end all funding for any foreign entity except Israel and Egypt.
Right.
And that includes Ukraine, by the way, and meaning the end of funding for Ukraine. So that may have an impact on this too. And if people listen to what that caller just said about her daughter and say, well, that really doesn't have anything to do about me, because I'm worried about me, which I sort of understand. I wish we all cared about all of our fellow human beings. The mass deportation thing, we talked about this yesterday at some length. There is no business that you go to and no product or service that you're dependent upon that does not rely upon undocumented people who, even if they haven't been subject to this Tom Homan sadistic mass deportation thing, are living in fear. I mean, isn't that enough for people to feel at least indirect effect of Trump's policy? Somebody you depend upon, even if you don't know their name, is maybe not going to work, probably not going to the doctor, maybe not sending their kid to school for fear that they're going to be rounded up and sent back to a country without much economic prospect and maybe with violence too. Where do you want to go?
Well, I want to go to Paul from Malden, but I also want to mention that Dan from Melrose,
yep.
We have a lot of our texters talking about the absence of Democratic Party leadership and the need to hold them accountable for failing us in this moment, whether they're in the majority or not. Keep in mind the midterms are right around the corner, so we could do something about Congress. He says AOC ran for a chairmanship of a committee, lost to a 74-year-old, 184 votes to 50. That's all you need to know about Democratic Party leadership. There needs to be change there, too.
Let me just say, in all fairness to that, Jamie Raskin, who I think is one of the superstars in Congress, just won the ranking seat on, I think it's the Judiciary Committee, defeating a guy who has been the ranking Democrat for, I think, a couple of decades. So it is true, AOC got crushed in that thing, but there has been some movement towards younger members, and I think he's one of the most brilliant, outspoken.
No, I have nothing but respect for Jamie Raskin, but the numbers kind of tell you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree. Paul and Malden, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show.
Paul.
Thank you for calling. Hi.
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 Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
Hi, Paul.
Jim,
how are you? Go ahead.
Good. I met you with Ty Montgomery's.
That event?
That event, yeah.
That was brilliant about her new chicken book. We did an event in Somerville. It was just fabulous. But go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I love you.
Thanks.
But anyhow, everybody talks about, how horrible this is and how horrible the world is, how horrible Trump is. But the point of it is, nobody brings up the white elephant in the room. And I do mean white elephant. What I'm saying is, nobody ever says, that white America has a lot to do with what's going on in this country. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them don't stand up for a lot of people of color or black people in general because they don't have clean hands. And the point is, what I'm saying is, nobody wants to come out and say, oh, gee, I'm for blacks, I'm for this, I'm for that, and afraid somebody from high school might come out and say, well, you remember when you said the N-word? Remember when you said that? Because I'll tell you, Jim, this country is so ingrained in racism that it makes even people of color racist and think the same way that white people think. And it's really, really that ingrained. And I wish people would stop and think, it's not us that's doing this stuff. It's not us that went over there and destroyed Iraq. It was white folks. It was not us that went over there.
Well, Paul, I got to stop you. It was us. It was us. It was done in our name by leaders who the majority, or at least the plurality of people elected. And the question is, if we were unhappy with that action, did we do something about it in the next election?
But he's making a slightly larger point. Which,
I know he is.
Ironically, I was not a slightly larger point.
Thank you, Paul.
Much larger point. I was talking with someone very close to me about yesterday, and that does need to be spoken about a lot more than we're speaking about it now, because that's the key to this disease of racism. Unfortunately.
Well, wait, before you leave this, don't you think the whole mass deportation is totally about that?
Well, it's the mass deportation, it's the freezing of the civil rights unit, it's the stopping of the grants. Programs that are funded through grants largely go to people who are not wealthy or not white. There are plenty that do benefit white people, but that part of it is the part that America doesn't talk about, and it is the key to a lot of what is going on here, but people don't necessarily want to be confronted with that. Unfortunately, we do have to stop.
We do.
So we're going to thank you for all of your calls and texts. Even if we didn't read them on the air, we do read them. So we appreciate it. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk to Trenni Casey, who's the anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Conflict has erupted along the northeastern border of Colombia, and as control of the region is disputed by two rebel militias.
It's a trafficking route for drugs, for gold, and all sorts of contraband.
Who the players are and what's at stake for Colombia, that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Medical Center, committed to delivering medical excellence that empowers all patients. Learn more about how BMC's team of experts is rewriting healthcare for cancer, sickle cell, and beyond at bmc.org. And American Repertory Theater, presenting The Odyssey. From the Cyclops to the Sirens, audiences can experience this cultural touchstone's mythical adventures like never before. February 9th through March 16th, amrep.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Cabral sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie's a little under the weather, but she's coming back via Zoom tomorrow to the library. She won't physically be here, but she'll be Zooming into the library. We are live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Roger Berkowitz is joining us at noon with not clam chowder, but double clam chowder. It's one of the few things putting me in a good mood. I also want to recognize this woman sitting in the office, Marita Rivero, is one of the wonderful history of GBH. Marita, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming. We're joined now on Zoom by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and a BPR contributor. Hey, Trenni, how are you?
Hi, Trenni.
Myself. I have to unmute myself to be helpful.
What did you say?
She was on mute.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Hello, Trenni.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, hope you're
Also
feeling
under
a
the
little
weather.
better. Yeah, I was going to say, she's under the weather, too. It's definitely going around.
Stuff going around. So, we'll stay away from you guys. Don't need to spread it.
Well, you know who's not under the weather? Kansas.
The Eagles and the Chiefs?
Yeah. I was going to say, they are kind of on cloud 9 right now. So tell us a little bit. The Chiefs, this is a three-peat for them.
Excuse me. They're also playing another team, which is my home team. So there are two who are not under the weather, if you'll excuse me, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles.
She did say the Eagles. I said they are on cloud
I didn't
nine.
hear the Eagles. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I have to
see?
say it even louder.
You're so sensitive because they're going to lose.
Sensitive.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trenni.
I said the Eagles, Jim.
Okay.
Congratulations on your team. A total beatdown of the Washington
Yes,
Commanders
they
in
did.
the NFC Championship game on Sunday, and they will take on the Chiefs. The second time, I think, in 3 years, these two teams will meet in the Super Bowl.
Yes,
Kansas City
yes.
won the last time. As Andrea just mentioned, the Chiefs are going for a three-peat, which, if you can believe this, has never, ever been accomplished in the history of the NFL. No NFL team has ever won 3 straight Super Bowls. So not even the Patriots during their dynasty. So if Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs, and of course Taylor Swift, because she's like their secret sauce, if they win 2 Sundays from now, they will be the first team to ever repeat, which of course is bringing up, although, maybe Jim's Eagles. The line right now, Jim, this is kind of a toss-up. The line right now, the Chiefs at last look as of yesterday, they were only favored by 1.5.
I saw that.
That's essentially a push. So this should, in theory, be a really good Super Bowl matchup between two really dynamic teams.
And obviously, I'm rooting for a hometown team, but I have to say, when you step back, and apologies for people who are not football fans, because there aren't many of you. Emmett Price, maybe, well, he is a football fan, just won't watch it for a variety of good principled reasons. The fact that this guy, Mahomes, who's the quarterback of Kansas City, I didn't realize this statistic. He started for 7 seasons. Every single season that he has started, he's been in the league, not in the Super Bowl every year, but in the league championship game leading to the Super Bowl. 7 out of 7 years is just stunning. And I mean, it's stunning. It's really.
I know this hurts the Patriots fans' ears and hearts, but we haven't seen anything this dominant since Brady and Belichick. The difference, I would say, because there's, of course, automatically, like we talked about this on my show yesterday. I was watching SportsCenter this morning. They had this conversation on SportsCenter. The natural sort of progression now is who's more dominant. Are the Chiefs now in the same conversation as the Patriots? Is Mahomes in the same conversation as Brady? Like, listen, if Mahomes wins, if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, it will be Mahomes' 4th Super Bowl title in 6 years.
It's incredible.
And his 4th before he turns 30. He does not turn 30 until next September. It's unbelievable, right? But Tom Brady still has 7. So he would only be like, we'll call it halfway to Tom Brady's overall Super Bowl title. And Tom Brady's longevity is something that made him special, right? Not only did he win 6 Super Bowls with the Patriots, but then when he left the Patriots, he went to Tampa Bay. He won it there. But I think that there is an argument to be made that while the longevity of the Patriots and being able to do it over 2 decades, to have to span that kind of time and be dominant for 20 years, I don't think that'll ever be matched. And I'm not sure it'll be able to be matched in this case because Andy Reid is older than Bill Belichick was at the time that they won their Super Bowls early in his tenure. But the fact that they've had so much success in such a short amount of time, and if they win 3 in a row, that's something the Patriots couldn't do.
Right.
So I think for different reasons, they're both 2 of the most dominant dynasties the NFL has ever seen.
Unless the Philadelphia Eagles win on
Unless the Philadelphia Eagles win.
And put a
behind
stop
Jalen
to all
Hurts
of that
and Saquon
talk. So, Trenni, when I first read this article, I thought to myself, what? You've got to be kidding. And then I read it a little more deeply, and I thought, you know what? This kind of makes sense. In the New York Times, there's an article by Tanya Ganjuli, and it's about whether or not sports should be an acceptable major in college. And you think of it as, something
ludicrous?
That is... My initial thought was that it was ludicrous, but one of the people who was quoted in the article, a guy by the name of Hollander, let me see, he's a clinical professor at NYU, New York University School of Professional Studies, basically says, but people who are dancers major in dance. People who are artists major in art. It wouldn't necessarily be exclusive to athletes, but certainly if it was a major, athletes could major in sports. Why not? So tell us a little bit about how the thinking goes about making this a major and what would actually come of something like this.
So this is interesting because I had the same response that probably both of you did when I saw this. I was like, wait, you're going to major in sports? Like, is this like a joke? Remember, this, I feel like it's a joke that was only made in an earlier generation, but like you majored in underwater basket weaving. Like, what are you going to do with that, that major? But two things sort of swayed me to the maybe this isn't a terrible idea side. One, it wouldn't just be sports, right? Like this clinical psychology professor, or whatever he is, clinical professor of whatever his title. It's like so long. It's such a long title. I don't know. Yeah. He suggests you're looking at sport management. You're looking at everything that encompasses inside of sports, right? And if you're an athlete, so much of your time is taken up by being a student athlete and your dedication to athletics, that some of that could be used as credit and experience, because you are gaining real life business experience now with these NIL models, right? The other thing that made me sort of just think like maybe this isn't such a bad idea. We're paying, like, listen, I've come to a point, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this article about the kid who's transferring through the transfer portal.
Yeah.
From Georgia to Miami as their quarterback, and he's going to get paid like $3 million.
Yeah.
Yes. To be the University of Miami's quarterback next year. I think they should just make I think they should just make college sports like professional. Like why is he even tied to college anymore? But that's not going to happen because these colleges love the money too much. And so they're willing to pay their athletes $3 million if you're a star quarterback, just like you would make if you were a rookie in the NFL. They're not going to give that money away. The gate, the concessions, the alcohol, everything so I guess maybe it's like a defeatist attitude, but if you can't beat them, join them. And at least this way, maybe these kids, because my biggest issue with so much of college sports is that you put so much time and effort into athletics that you don't necessarily get life skills out of it. And maybe you're passed through classes too easily. You don't take classes that could benefit you and help you down the line. And so it ends up being a wasted 4 years. And if you don't become a pro athlete, you leave college with essentially nothing, unless you're a high level NIL athlete that goes on to pro sports. So maybe if you could major in sports and then pick things within athletics, classes to take, again, sports management, sports marketing, PR, like all of these things that are in all of these other different buckets in college, but you could cut them under one umbrella. At the very least, maybe these athletes come out with some manageable skills out of college if they cannot play professional sports. And it's not just this sort of factory where the universities are using these, again, I use it in air quotations, student athletes to play ball or play a sport, and then they're just sort of left floundering after college because they don't have any actual educational skills that they learn like the rest of us who go through internships and stuff. So maybe that's a little too pie in the sky, but that's sort of the one way I think that maybe this wouldn't actually be a terrible idea.
Well, first of all, I have the exact same reaction of both of you. Two things. One, while I agree with everything you said, I think you made it far too complicated. I think what Andrea mentioned at the beginning is, if you can major in dance, you can major in theater. How is a dancer or an actor or a producer of a theatrical thing who is majoring in that different from an athlete? And by the way, to be clear, and I think you did make this clear, this is not like your major means all you have to do is play on the football team or the volleyball team or whatever. You get credit for that, and there'd be other corollary things, as Trenni said. And by the way, I used to believe, as you were mentioning, about, let's face it, major college sports, basketball and football at least, should be minor leagues. But the problem with that is, unlike pro sports, where the worst athlete was a great player in college or high school, there are a lot of players, even on national championship teams, that are not great players. They made the team, and they're not ready to be a minor. So it seems to me that this is a sane, well-reasoned solution. And also, these athletes, as you say, may get more out of their college experience than they have historically. And one of the great things Derek Jackson ever did, which I think also sports is, I don't know what his position is, when he was an op-ed columnist at the Globe, he'd do the brackets every March Madness but he didn't do it based upon the teams that were in it. He did it based upon graduation rate. And there was almost always an inverse proportion, with some exceptions, to the teams that were the best basketball teams and the graduation rates of the kids on those teams. And again, there were some exceptions, like Georgetown when John Thompson was the coach and that sort of thing. But people should read this piece.
No, it's a
wonderful idea.
It really is. And also you could clearly minor in something else. But what I thought of when I read it was, if part of the course was about the impact of sports on history, the impact of sports in countries on national morale, an entire history of the Olympics, the concept of fair play, the concept of good sportspersonship, the kinds of things you could weave in because sports crosses sort of all lines and sort of everybody can sort of find something in it that they like. You could probably get a more fulsome education majoring in sports because it's going to teach you about political science and history, maybe not math, but some of the other things that you would get in other courses.
Yeah, it's no longer that. I always kind of joke like we're the toy department sports, but now with all of the issues facing athletes, whether it's fair play, equal pay, fair play for women, whether it's, LGBTQ rights, whether it's, what the economics of having an Olympics or a World Cup or something does to a region, like that ties in economics. And it's a way to, I think, teach people things and sort of with really hard, real world examples that are easy to consume and sort of easy to understand.
One last thing about this names, image, and likeness thing. I've mentioned several times, Charlie Baker was one of the awardees at the Embrace Boston's MLK Awards last Sunday night as he danced to the stage with his wife, Lauren, as did Deval Patrick and his wife, and Irene Monroe and Thea James. It was really unbelievable. So this Beck guy, I read this morning, is going to make $4 million being the college quarterback for Miami. How about the player on the team who blocks for him that ensures that he becomes a superstar and makes $400 million in the pros? He's likely to get nothing because no one ever heard of him. Where's the equity? I should have asked Charlie Baker, was my point. Where's the equity? Where's the equity in that?
So I don't know that he'll get nothing, Jim. I think now, obviously your skill, it's really no different than pro sports, right? Your quarterback for, we'll just use the Patriots. Drake May is going to make a lot more than David Andrews, who is his center, will probably ever make in the NFL.
Yeah, but everybody's making at least $1 million, right?
That's by virtue. Now, what I don't understand, and I'll just admit this, especially on a team as large as a college football team, when you have upwards a pro football team is 53-man active roster, and then you have your practice squad and whatnot.
Right.
College teams can be upwards of 70, 80 kids. So I don't know if the way that it is set up, I have heard things that Ohio State, who just won the national championship. I'm pretty sure, I'm 99.9% sure Burt Breer, who's an Ohio State alum and an NFL reporter for Amazon and Sports Illustrated, told me the NIL allotment just for Ohio State football is $20 million. So that sort of tells me that everybody gets something.
Oh, okay. We'll check. Okay,
but I honestly don't know exactly how that works. But I think now, somebody asked me yesterday, hey, do you donate to Marquette's NIL program? And I was like, no, I do not. Absolutely. No, when I donate to Marquette, I donate to their first year college student program because I was a first generation college student on my father's side. I absolutely do not donate to NIL. But if it means they'll win a title, maybe I'll donate to the NIL.
We'll check out, because I don't know the answer to my question. We'll check it out before you're here next week. We're talking to Trenni Casey.
So Trenni,
I'll ask around.
Great,
Jim. I'll ask
great,
her.
great,
They'll
great.
probably know.
Trenni, the Washington Post had a great article about Alyssa Liu and her return to figure skating and how she is likely to be representing the United States in winning, nationals and then representing the United States in the Olympics. She stepped away from the sport, and we also got some news about great news for Madison Keys because she won her tournament, but also she's let people know that she has been taking care of her mental health. And although Alyssa Liu didn't say exactly why she stepped away at 16, there seems to be some element of care, of self-care, and she's now back into the sport. We've seen it in women's gymnastics. We've heard Simone Biles talk about it, and other gymnasts talk about it. Along with this, I want you to talk about two things: the sort of uptick in the popularity of women's sports, and then the commensurate transparency and openness by elite women athletes about caring for their mental health as they take off as individuals or as their sports take off.
Yeah, I guess I'll tackle the second one first. In terms of Alyssa Liu, she actually did talk about what made her walk away. She said she wasn't feeling any joy anymore. She was 16. It's all she ever did. She was missing out. So she left. She went to college. She kind of went back to normal life. And then one day she was skiing And she was having a great time because I think she maybe went to CU Boulder. I might be wrong about that, but at the very least, she was in Colorado skiing. And she was like, if I can have this much fun on the slopes, why can't I have fun ice skating? And she put her skates back on and she found joy in it. And she went back to her coach and said, I think I'm ready to skate again. But she needed some time away because it's hard. Like, think about being a 16-year-old kid in your entire life. She probably started skating when she is old enough to walk, right? So we'll say 3-4 years old, she started skating. That's 10 years of practices before school and after school and tournaments on weekends and travel. And then the pressure of being a possible Olympic champion for an entire country, which is similar to what happened to Madison Keys. Madison Keys, I mean, I remember covering Maddie Keys at in the Rio Olympics. That was almost 10 years ago now. And she was always this hopeful, right? Like this young woman who was going to be the next Serena or the next Venus Williams. She had all this pressure on her and she just couldn't win a Grand Slam. Both women, Madison never walked away from tennis. She has been grinding away her entire life, trying to win a Grand Slam. She finally won the Australian Open. But both women talked about, going through therapy, working through the emotions, the pressure, the immense pressure there is on people to excel. And when you are especially in Madison Keys, case, I think a young minority who's coming up behind two strong black women who redefined the sport of tennis. That's a lot of pressure on someone to think that if you don't do X, you're not successful. No matter how many small tournaments you win, if you don't win an Olympic gold or you don't win a Grand Slam, your career, everything you've worked for since you were a child is all for naught. And so I think that them talking about this is really great for other young people, right? Like if you need help and you're not happy, it's okay to step away and come back. It's okay for something to take longer than someone thinks it should take for you to get to where you need to go. I mean, I think that's one of the great things that's come about from women's sports is the willingness of women to be really vulnerable about what it takes mentally to be a high-level athlete. But to be fair, I think it's easier for a woman to do that. And I've said that when I talk about my own mental health. Like, I think it's a lot easier. It's always been, I think, sort of acceptable for women to go to therapy. We're talkers. Studies show we talk to our friends about our feelings more. We're more open with our feelings. For men, it's always been this stoicism and this toughness that you can't talk about it. But hopefully, I think that's starting to erode as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but I kind of feel like that's where we are in women's sports. And I think that might be, Andrea, why women's sports is having a moment. Because unlike men's sports where maybe you don't feel like you can identify with someone, you don't know the stories, the backstory, how they got there, because there is sort of that wall up of I'm this big tough guy who's just really good at a sport. Women sort of let you into who they are a little bit more. And I wonder if that's a draw for people. People want to know who they're rooting for. They want to feel a connection to you. And I think women being open about what they've gone through draws that connection.
And by the way, you just said it in passing. Trenni, you have been another incredibly courageous, inspirational soul and shown, as I say, a lot of courage talking about your stuff too, which I think really matters to a lot of people. Now, we only have 30 seconds left. Can you explain quickly Boston Common Golf? All the big players.
I don't get this.
Do they hit into a video screen? I mean, okay. 30 seconds. What do they do?
All right, so I watched this last night. So it's 3-on-3 golf.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like skins, I think. You hit into a simulator for your drive, your approach, but then when you get onto the green, there's actually a green in a big stadium. And so you actually putt on a green. So it's partially virtual golf and partially in. I'm not gonna lie, we watched it last night for the first time, my husband and I was like, this is kind of entertaining. They have a shot clock. You have to complete your shot in 40 seconds. And Tiger Woods last night did not hit a putt before the shot clock, and there's a heartbeat.
But the fans can scream too, right? You don't have to do that.
Fans can scream. Great. There's music playing when they're hitting their shots.
We'll do more next time. We got to go. Trenni, it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
See you, Trenni. I don't get this at all. We've been speaking with Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Coming up after the noon news, Roger Berkowitz of Rogers Fish Company is here with .com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you
and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu. A new series from Henry Louis Gates Jr. examines the powerful influence of Black migration on American culture and society. Don't miss Great Migrations, A People on the Move. Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. You know him as the former head of Legal Seafoods, though nowadays his official title.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The White House's Office of Management and Budget says it's ordering a halt to federal grants, loans, and financial assistance programs effective 5 p.m. Eastern today. A senior administration official tells NPR that the directive issued in an internal memo should not be interpreted as a full funding freeze and might last as short as a day if agencies determine their programs are in compliance with the Trump administration's priorities. Well, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says people across the U.S. are in panic.
The Trump administration announced a halt to virtually all federal funds across the country. In an instant, Donald Trump has shut off billions, perhaps trillions of dollars that directly support states, cities, towns, schools, hospitals, small businesses, and most of all, American families.
Schumer and other critics argue a funding freeze is unlawful because Congress has already approved the money to be spent. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is sending hundreds of National Guard soldiers to the border to assist U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Texas Public Radio's Gabriela Alcorta-Solorio reports.
Abbott is directing the Texas Military Department to coordinate with the Trump administration on border security, a change from the Republican governor's legal battles with the Biden administration. Abbott spent the last 4 years testing the state's ability to enforce immigration law. Now, with Trump in office, Abbott says the state will be working with the federal government. The 400 soldiers being deployed are from the Texas Tactical Border Force, established in 2023 to aid the thousands of Texas National Guard soldiers already mobilized to the border. The Pentagon announced last week that it has begun deploying more than 1,500 active duty troops to the southern border. I am Gabriela Alcorta-Solorio in San Antonio.
Israel and Hamas have already begun preparing to negotiate the next phase of their ceasefire deal. That second phase would see all remaining living hostages freed and the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Tel Aviv.
Under the deal, Hamas is expected to gradually release Israeli hostages in exchange for Israel releasing Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Hamas says it will release 3 more hostages Thursday and 3 Saturday. In this first phase of the ceasefire, Hamas will release a total of 33 hostages, some no longer alive. Israeli spokesman David Mencer.
25 are alive and 8 are dead. And Israel has shared those details with their families.
An official familiar with the ceasefire negotiations says Israel and Hamas are discussing the framework for talks next week on the next phase of the deal, including the release of all the remaining living hostages. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Mashpee Wampanoag tribe has opened the first light casino welcome center in East Taunton. It's on land the tribe is in trust after years of legal challenges that were finally settled last year. Tribal Chairman Brian Whedon says despite the presence of 10 slot machines, the center is just a preview of what is proposed for the site.
The Welcome Center is a stepping stone on the tribe's path to self-determination and exercising our tribal sovereignty. It is not a casino. It's simply a welcome center with some sample games in there, and also an opportunity to learn about the tribe in our history, in our culture, in our traditions.
Whedon said the tribe continues to meet with Taunton officials about plans for a resort and casino on that site. And the Lunar New Year starts tomorrow. The local Asian communities are celebrating as the Year of the Snake gets underway. Events are scheduled for all around the Boston area starting this week and going into next month. One of the biggest will be the Chinatown Lion Dance Parade on Sunday, February 9th. Felix Louis is president of the Chinese Benevolent Association of New England, which organizes that parade.
The Chinese lion dance usually means a greeting or good luck circulation to celebrate the Chinese New Year.
Louis says thousands are expected to come out for the parade. Another Lunar New Year celebration is taking place at the Museum of Fine Arts later this week. That event is set for 5 o'clock Thursday afternoon. 34 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Braude. Andrea Cabral is sitting in for the still slightly ill Marjorie Egan, who will Zoom in tomorrow at the library. That would be Marjorie. Hello again, Andrea. How are you?
Hello again, Jim.
We're live from the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So I wanted clam chowder today. I didn't want just clam chowder. I wanted double clam chowder. So I said to my coworkers, can you search around and find somebody who has double clam chowder? And lo and behold, who did we find? Roger Berkowitz.
Yeah, and you scraped the bottom of the,
the
container and you found
But people
me.
say you're a nice guy. Roger Berkowitz is now the CEO of Rogers Fish Company, the company that ships ready-to-cook seafood directly to your door. We'll talk about it. He's also a member of the NOAA's Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee, founding president of the Massachusetts Seafood Collaborative. That's a nonprofit advocacy group of fishermen, processors, and wholesalers dedicated to strengthening the mass seafood industry. And in a former life, he was head of this, we don't call it a chain, you're not allowed to call it a chain, a group of fabulous restaurants. I think the name was Legal Seafoods. Roger, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good, Jim.
It's an honor to have you. Oh, by the way, and before we start, he has brought a vat of double clam chowder, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And if you go over there, you may partake on Roger Berkowitz. Very generous of you.
Please.
Thank you so much, Roger.
You guys, I just want to say, it is really delicious.
It is really delicious.
It's fabulous. You've got to have some.
Really delicious. Hi, Roger. Nice to see you.
Good, Jim. Nice to be here.
And
Thank
it's
you,
very
Andrea.
nice to finally meet you, although I feel like I know you because you used to do your own commercials for Legal Seafood.
Yes, it was cheaper that way. Yeah.
But, I have to say, I think of Legals. Legals was around when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a big deal. If we had enough money, we could go out to, not eat fast food. We would go to Legals, and we'd have clam chowder, and we'd have, so it's part of my Boston upbringing because I'm originally from Rhode Island. But the commercials, I think, made you're so accessible. And it was so clear that this was your company and you loved it. And the product was always really good. I just enjoyed the fact that you could have farmed that work out. I know it might have been cheaper, but you could have farmed it out to anybody, but you chose to do it yourself. And I think that actually endeared you to the public. So you had decided at one point to retire from Legals, but now you're starting a new company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. After being away from it for a little while, the pandemic gave everyone an opportunity to kind of sit back and think, okay, what's next? And I realized I didn't want to sit on my rear end. I still wanted to do things with seafood. I was still involved with the seafood industry, more in a not-for-profit scenario. And I thought, there's still things I want to do, so why not? And so we started something called Rogers Fish Co. This was a clever name that came up from our former New York ad agency that said, all right, well, just call it that. And I said, okay.
What they charge
They're
you
worth
for that?
every penny.
I don't even ask.
Okay, good.
But, yeah.
And so what does Rogers Fish Co. do? What was the goal and what is it doing?
So the goal of it was to really kind of fulfill some of the things I always wanted to do with seafood. One of the things was to explore a sort of a quick serve, something in between a quick serve and a full serve. And as the restaurant industry has evolved, it's becoming the type of thing that I think more people might be interested in, because obviously, look, I don't have to tell you guys, the cost of going out to eat today is extraordinarily expensive for many reasons, one of which the cost of labor and everything else going into it. So people, as I looked at this, people needed a more affordable alternative. And so to be able to put something together where you can get high-end restaurant quality product, either online, soon to be in retail, and in a quick serve scenario, might be filling a void that currently exists.
In the great movie The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman says, key word he whispers, plastic.
Plastic.
The key word with you, I believe, is nitrogen. Is that correct? Is nitrogen still the key to getting this fresh to our door?
So this is interesting. I've always sort of been intrigued by nitrogen. Not so much frozen, but the idea of nitrogen and what nitrogen can do. And post-pandemic, or actually during the pandemic, a lot of the boats were not coming in with the same cadence that they formerly had. And so boats that might have come in on a weekly basis with gray sole or whatever were coming in like once every 10 days. And so it goes out for 10 days. And what people don't realize is just because they come in and the fish isn't frozen on that, what is really fresh? So we knew from our experience in the fish business, really, you only want the last 1 or 2 days catch. So if it wasn't coming in a normal cadence and we took the last 1 or 2 days catch and we put it under nitrogen, you essentially put in limbo. You keep the quality of it in suspension, if you will.
Stasis for freshness.
I like that.
Yeah.
So I call it nitro fresh. Yeah, because when a boat comes in today, there are wholesalers that buy the product, but it might be a mixed lot, 1, 2, 3, 10 days old, and then it sits in a wholesaler for 1, 2, or 3 days, and by the time it gets to your plate, it could be 1, 2, or 3 days. This is sort of guaranteed to be as fresh as it gets.
Do you still go to the piers at like 5 a.m. like you did in the old days?
6:30.
He's sleeping in.
Okay, no, you're entitled to 6:30.
Yeah, thank you. I used to get up really early.
6:30 is fine.
I'm fascinated by the literal explosion in people for the very reasons you talk about, wanting restaurant quality, fresh food delivered to their door. I mean, I a couple of years ago, I signed up with Butcher Box because it was a local guy, fresh meat, and I knew it was no hormones, no antibiotics. I stopped that after a while. I now do wild grain because the bread is fantastic. And the idea that you would get really fresh fish. I mean, people will go to part of the way Whole Foods makes its money is people go there for fresh fish and then end up spending $500 on everything else, right?
Right, yes.
But so I'm sort of curious about how you see the balance between this desire for the exact thing that you're offering people and the deleterious impact on the restaurant business. Because people, you can make it at home. You can look like a bum. You can watch TV while you're eating.
Right.
You don't have to go out.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point, because there is an evolution taking place now, and it started actually a little bit pre-pandemic. In that the costs of going out were starting to rise. Now, of course, the pandemic hits, and first of all, restaurants are closed for 6 months, then they're open at maybe 50% capacity. I'm talking full-serve restaurants. The next 6 months, and then by the time they get open, they realize, my gosh, we still owe monies on rent. The cost of labor has gone through the roof, and so restaurants naturally have to go up significantly on their price point. So restaurants pre-pandemic, for the most part, were the type of thing that you would integrate into your lifestyle. You go out to eat 2-3 times a week. Now it's sort of evolving to more of a specialty, celebratory kind of thing where it's a birthday anniversary promotion. You might do some lunches, out there, but the whole notion of going out to eat is fairly expensive these days. And so so we're saying, okay, well, what would make it less expensive without compromising on the quality? And then if you take great quality and you can either finish it or finish it off and you're rubbing it home, or if you know how to cook and you want to cook, you can take a a piece of fish and do whatever you do with it. Or, you can, buy it soon, I hope, in grocery stores.
Do you know how to cook, by the way?
I do, actually.
You don't, do you?
I do.
I know you worked in Inman Square with your father. You really know how to cook? Raise your right hand. Tell me I know.
I do.
You really know how to cook?
I'm not a formal cook. Actually, I got my training from my grandmother.
No.
My mother's mother. My mother can't cook, but she's going on 96. She doesn't mind if I say it now. But I watched her. She was the most incredible cook, chef I've ever met. And she didn't write anything down. Everything was by taste. And so I got to understand flavors. And so even though she was kosher, when I came up and did the double clam chowder, it was sort of the memory of the flavors that she used in her cooking.
Okay, that's my next question. We believe in truth in advertising here.
Yes.
I tried to do a count while you were talking. So does double mean double Roger Berkowitz, or does it just mean increased clams in the clam chowder?
It's a little misleading. I'll tell you why. Because it's actually close to triple.
Oh,
you can
got me there.
You can kind of tell when you stick the spoon in.
Yes.
Is that true, or are you making it up?
Yes. No, I'm not making it up. It is close to triple. And when I separated from legal, I couldn't take the same recipe, and nor did I want to. It was perfectly good, but so I was thinking, well, how can I make it better? What would be the types of things we could do to make it better? And one of them is certainly putting a lot more clams in it. And then I changed the stock in the broth a little bit to be richer without adding cream.
Look at her nodding. Look at her nodding.
You can taste it, and it's not heavy.
That's right.
But it's full.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. So if you stick a spoon, usually, what we used to laugh, if someone's chowder, you could stick a spoon in and it didn't move, it was like cement or paste, that really wasn't good chowder. So if the spoon doesn't move on this, it's because of the clams.
Why don't you call it triple clam chowder? No, I'm serious. I mean, let's get to it. Think about that for a while. So despite the fact that you're talking about...
Before you go ahead. I just want to ask you one more question about
Yes.
the company. So given that you're delivering this fish, are you planning on partnering, including recipes that people can follow, or partnering with chefs? Because people, once they get it, want to know how to make it the best way they can.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're finding out there's a certain number, and it's not the highest percentage, but a certain percentage of people that do want to cook themselves. And so we will include recipes. Recipes that we do that are just you need to finish off in the oven or either cook and or heat up. We are partnering with different chefs, to come in and work with on some.
Because the cooking shows are like hot. Everybody's got their favorite show. Yeah.
How come you don't have a cooking show? Exactly.
Well, you
can't answer any of these questions.
You set me up.
No, okay.
Yeah, because you want me to say I can't cook, but I've done. Actually, I used to do these 1-minute cooking segments.
You did not.
I did too.
Was that the thing you did on BZ Radio, or where was that?
Well, you can't do a cooking show on radio.
Well, that's a very good point. Where'd you do a 1-minute segment?
I did it actually when Tom Bergeron broke into BZ on camera. We used to do 1-minute segments.
People are talking.
Yes,
I was on that show. We called it "People Are Screaming" most mornings. So Roger Berkowitz, we want to talk about the industry and the restaurant industry. But before we do, despite you talking about the desire of people, and I'm one of them, to be at home, even though I love restaurants and go out as often as I can, you're opening a brick and mortar deal somewhere, aren't you?
Yes.
What are you opening?
So we're opening a sort of, and I'd like to call it a quick serve, but it's kind of in between a quick serve and a full serve, but it's really a quick serve style. So it's taking a higher quality meal that you would expect to get in a full serve restaurant, but in a quick serve scenario.
Where are you going to tell us?
Yes.
Where is it?
We're going to do it at Logan Airport. Terminal A in the satellite. So if it's the Delta terminal, so if you go into the main terminal, go downstairs and walk across and come up. As soon as you come up on the escalator, you'll see it on the left-hand side. So it's not there yet. It'll probably May is really what we're looking at.
And you're selling in some retail establishments too, or you're not? Or
well, so in March, I'm actually going to announce right now because no one really knows it.
Go ahead.
In March, we're going to be launching in Market Basket.
What, my favorite? Oh, my
Really?
God.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was for Market Basket, not you, by the way.
I know. One family business to another, but...
Do you know him, by the way?
I do.
Can you get him to come on the damn show? We've been trying since that thing where he and his cousin went to war, and the workers and the managers went on strike and supported it. Can you get him to come on here?
I'll ask.
Well, meaning no. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's all we can do.
He's generally a little publicity shy. Really good
Unlike
guy,
other people, if you know what I mean. Okay, so Roger Berkowitz, we talked a lot, and I think we talked to you about when you were here last time. I believe the fastest warming body of water, if not the second fastest in the world, is the Gulf of Maine. Obviously, which has an impact. What's climate change doing to the fish industry?
Well, it's making it really difficult. I mean, from anything from lobsters, we're seeing more southern species of fish like mahi and tautog and all these sort of species that we never paid any attention to now migrating up because they're going to colder waters, and our fish, which are haddock, cod, gray sole, halibut, are going further north. So what's happening is, the catches are unpredictable right now. We have to look at it as, is there a market? Can there be a greater market for black sea bass, as an example? And so there are still fish to be harvested, but the real difficulty right now is the water temperature, and it's accelerating at a much faster rate than initially anticipated. And
do
that's
people
really
get set in their way? When I live here, which I have for 30-some years, and haddock or scrod becomes your thing.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I mean this sincerely, someone like you says, I've got a great alternative. It's coming, it's moving up the coast little by little because of climate change. Are people who are set in their ways able to change their ways?
Not easily. And so you can still get haddock and cod. It's just not as available in local waters. You can find it further up the coast in Maine and in Canada.
And it'll cost more.
And it'll cost more. And then you can bring a lot of the fish actually migrated, believe it or not, towards Iceland.
Really?
And the Icelandic fishing industry is very, very sophisticated, but they're getting, if there is a benefit to anybody, it's the Icelanders.
But part of this is also that am I wrong, or hasn't the fishing industry as an industry been a little slow to pivot itself? Because climate change has been spoken about in a very long time, and usually, the industry has to pivot, make people more accustomed to new kinds of fish, or, and I think that's kind of part of the problem. We are diehard New Englanders when it comes to our fish. Yes. But the industry itself could kind of help us along, I think.
I'm not going to say that we're not a little primitive in some of the thinking and sort of being caught a little bit behind the eight ball on this. So what's happening with some of the local species is that there's a lot of fish farming taking place right now. And there's some good fish farming and there's some bad fish farming. One of the arguments against fish farming is that you have to use wild fish, to feed the farm fish, and people scratch their heads and ask if that's really sustainable. There are actually some people doing some very interesting things in fish farming and aquaculture. Kelp, raising kelp, which is really, the minerality in kelp is so healthy for you. It's unbelievable that they're doing that in Maine. And then in New Zealand, what they're doing is they took the species of salmon, which is king salmon from the Northwest that you find in Alaska, and they're farming it on the southern tip of New Zealand, the South Island, southern tip, closest landmass to Antarctica. And what they're feeding it is algae. So they're not feeding fish to them. They've algae, and we've had that fish, and it will blow you away.
It's very nutritious. Algae is very nutritious.
And it melts in your mouth. You think, this is the best fish I've ever had. So people are making really good progress.
By the way, this chowder is really, in all seriousness, spectacular. There are a couple of texts that are relating to you. An anonymous texter says, the Gulf of Maine will be cold again once it's renamed the other Gulf of America. That's a very good idea. Now, this is a personal plea to you, Roger, so be kind.
Okay.
Please, Roger, please bring back your light clam chowder. I've enjoyed it every time I ate it. Legals, please, Roger, let me taste it before the good Lord takes me. This person, right? Is that person going to be taken before they have light clam chowder?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
I will say that some of the thinking in the light clam chowder is in the double clam chowder, because it's the richness of the stock that really, and the absence of cream and flour.
Oh, it's taking the place of the whatever.
Yeah. So if you want to somehow or in some way experience it before I get to the light clam chowder.
Are you ever going to get to the light clam chowder? Yes or no? I mean, that's what the guy wants. The person wants to know.
Yes,
of
course.
Yes, fine.
Yes.
Can you do one more? Since you were a big-time restaurateur, even though it wasn't a chain, you're not. When you know Roger, you're not allowed to call it a chain.
It might be now, but go ahead.
What is it again? It might be now. Whoa, slid that baby in there. What would you call those restaurants of yours? What were they if they weren't a chain? What were they?
A group of restaurants.
Group of restaurants. Okay, on one hand, there was COVID, which was a nightmare, as we've discussed with many restaurateurs. On the other hand, on the other end, the other bookend, I guess you could call it, we've got mass deportation threats with lots of undocumented workers in restaurants. Maybe 1 million is what I read in the New York Times the other day, not to mention climate issues. What's the trick to survival in the brick and mortar restaurant world in 2025, Roger Berkowitz?
Well, that's a fair question. I think figuring out ways of getting food to people, high quality food to people, without the necessity of being so labor intensive. I think whatever that model is. So I'm looking at it from sort of the quick serve kind of model, but a higher quality product. I think it's that the issue, whether it's undocumented employees right now, or just what you end up paying them, whether they're documented or not, is just going to keep pushing that price right up there. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure how many restaurants are going to be out there or are going to be able to attract the clientele that are going to be able to afford those prices. So that's still to be determined.
Some are using AI, trying not to necessarily supplant jobs, the actual jobs, but AI for sort of and I'm talking really like fast food restaurants, for the taking of the order, and then the human might step in and do something if there's a problem, but I don't know how far that will take them.
Well, I know a lot of quick serves are working on that now, and they're figuring out, how can we eliminate 5 minutes here and 5 minutes here?
Right.
And AI will probably be very helpful in that analysis. But at the end of the day, we have to look at you as a consumer has to be able, to like the quality and like the consistency and the value. If those three things aren't there, it's not going to work.
Before you go, when did you sell legal? When was the date of the sale closing?
The end of 20.
How many times have you been to Legal Seafood since you sold it?
7, 8, 10.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Do you sneak in incognito with like a Woody Allen little mustache, kind of Groucho mustache?
A bucket hat.
You just walk in. What do you do?
I usually just walk in. Usually it's at off hours.
How does that feel?
Odd.
Does it?
Yeah.
No,
it's But, I mean, I've been able to separate. I think it was, the first 6 months was difficult. And then after that, I got so focused on what I'm doing now, I don't even think about it.
You know what they don't have? Triple clam chowder. Do you know that, Roger Berkowitz? They don't.
I do know that, yes.
What's your website?
RogersFishCo.com, and there's no apostrophe because you can't do it.
I think
Before we go,
that.
would you like to say anything derogatory about Manhattan clam chowder?
That's a great question.
Well, it's interesting. I got to be careful because we just produced a really great Manhattan clam chowder.
Okay, so
the
except
answer is
for
no.
Rogers Fish Company. Okay.
Yes.
We usually slam Manhattan's fish.
Yes. Yeah, and so coming in March, you can, beginning of March, you can get it at Market Basket, and Cafe Nero is going to be carrying it as well. And you're from Rhode Island, you said.
Yes.
Dave's Fresh Marketplace is going to be carrying it. Yes.
This is great. I can go anywhere and get the best quality fish and chowder.
This is really, really good. Roger, you're very generous. I hope everybody loved it. It's right over there if you haven't gotten already. Roger Berkowitz.
Thank you, Roger.
It's great to see you, Roger.
Andrew, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
He's actually a very decent guy, too, in addition to everything else which matters in the world in 2025. You are, right? Yeah, okay, fine. Let's move on. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Roger Berkowitz, CEO of Rogers Fish Company. He's also a member of the NOAA's Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee and is founding president of the Massachusetts Seafood Collaborative, a nonprofit advocacy group of fishermen, processors, and wholesalers dedicated to strengthening the Massachusetts seafood industry. Coming up after a quick break, 2 Boston Globe reporters who have been hounding legislative leaders at the State House so you don't have to. Are our politicians holding up their promise of more transparency? I don't think so. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
The Healey administration has reached an agreement with the U.S. Department of Labor to repay federal funds that were dispersed erroneously during the pandemic.
GBH News.
The agreement means Massachusetts has to return roughly $2.1 billion over the next decade. In a statement, Governor Healey called the mistake, which occurred under former Governor Charlie Baker, quote, incredibly frustrating.
GBH 89.7, online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Boston Symphony Orchestra, presenting Stravinsky's The Firebird, February 6th, 7th, and 8th at Symphony Hall. A wondrous experience conducted by Natalie Stutzman. More information at bso.org. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Andrea Cabral sitting in for Marjorie Egan. Marjorie is back tomorrow, only on Zoom. So if you're coming in the library, you'll see her on Zoom. She's recovering from something she'll tell us about tomorrow. Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, is sitting in. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello again, Jim.
We are live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie is really upset she's missing this. Well, she was upset about the clam chowder, too. Joined now by Samantha Gross and Matt Stout, political reporters at the Boston Globe. They are the reason we know how House Speaker Ron Mariano really feels about Diana DeZoglio's attempts to audit the legislature, the secret relationships between lobbyists and lawmakers, not to mention those smoke-filled back rooms in the North End. Sam, Matt, it's great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else. I was giving you room to say
it. Well, let me say it again. It's really good to see you. That's why I didn't say it the first time. Go ahead.
Okay, so Matt, we're going to start with you because we're going to talk about, the big McGill of the $62 billion budget plan that Governor Healey unveiled. It's got something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, actually, in it. Give us the highlights. What's in this budget? And also tell us what might be missing that you thought might be there.
Well, I guess with every budget, it's huge, and there's so much in there. I mean, it starts to put numbers to the governor's promises to put billions of dollars into transportation, toward higher ed campuses. It doesn't include any broad-based tax increases, but there are tax increases depending on what you're buying and or getting less of taxes. And in terms of what I was surprised at, I would say there was a lot of things they talked about in the week leading up to it, and you kind of saw some of the details start to be fleshed out with this document. But it's also, a 400-page document, and there's a ton. It
looks like maybe your gummy bears might cost you a little bit more.
Yeah, they're gonna the proposal to apply the sales tax to candy, so essentially a candy tax.
Are you surprised by that, though? I mean, it's almost not a vice tax, not like a alcohol or cigarette tax, but those kind of things that we enjoy attacking on a little bit more.
They did say part of it is to raise revenue, part of it is to I'm paraphrasing here, but kind of align with their public health goals. And I guess kids eating lots of candy are not part of the public health goals, but I mean, we've seen this before.
It is for the kids, but not for them.
I believe. I'm trying to think what year it was, but I believe it was under, Governor Deval Patrick also proposed doing like a soda tax.
Soda tax.
And that wasn't adopted, so it's not as if the legislature automatically is going to be on board. We don't know, but there has been attempts in the past to do something like this. Yeah.
Speaking of the governor, today or yesterday in the paper, I think this is you, Matt. We're going to stay with you a minute, Sam. We'll get to you in a second here. Says no more non-disclosure agreements in the executive branch. which I guess is coincidental with the fact that as we speak at exactly 12:30, the auditor is holding a press conference to release her audit on settlement agreements and confidentiality clauses, as it's called, across multiple state agencies. Was this just to get ahead of Diana DiZoglio?
Yeah, this was, they said that they've been working with them. They wanted to sort of put out there what they've been doing because it's in sort of their change is what appears to be in direct response to some of the things that are in the audit, where, the auditor said that, there was no policies, written policies about how settlements should be handled, about, the use of non-disclosure agreements, that by creating this, 3-page policy, there is now something in the governor's office sort of laying this out in writing because the auditor said she could not find any despite, I guess, as she puts it, a supposed policy created in 2018 under Charlie Baker, but they couldn't find any evidence it actually existed.
I know you're not an editorialist, but do your best with this question, Matt. If you had to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how much would you say the Speaker and the Senate President hate Diana DiZoglio, the auditor?
I can't get in the mind of them. I know that they haven't spoken personally in a very long time. I think there's a lot of frustration on both sides with how they feel the others have kind of conducted themselves with everything around the audit. So it's not warm and fuzzy.
Do they care? And one last thing about this, I don't want to belabor it. 72% of the people almost voted for this audit. And I know they're not worried about losing their jobs because there are virtually no Republicans in Massachusetts. And I think that's part of the problem. It's a one-party state, so they don't fear for their jobs. Do they care that 3 out of 4 voters in Massachusetts said we want this to happen? And they're basically stonewalling it in any way they possibly can?
I think they do. I mean, you talk to a lot of legislators up there, and they'll point to this past session, all the different bills, major legislation that they passed, they got signed, and feel that this constant discussion about how they do it, about transparency, is overshadowing what they feel is really good work and really important legislation. So they do care, and it is, I would say, something they repeatedly point to. They talk about trying to do things to be more transparent up there, and it's. I think the audit helped sort of dislodge is not the right word, but it definitely helped sort of
get them off the dime,
bring them there and start talking about it. So no, I think they're well aware, and I think they do care.
Glad to hear that.
They do care.
But what I don't understand is and I'd like a reaction from both of you on this. What does it mean when you say compliance with a law is in the eye of the beholder? I don't know who the beholder is. Who
That's
is
what Mariano said? Is that what he said?
Yeah. Who is he talking about when he was asked if he was going to comply? Do either of you have any? I mean, Samantha, do you have I don't even know how you kind of cover that. Yeah,
I mean, I think those comments obviously made headlines, in the Globe and elsewhere. And I think that this has been kind of the way that they've approached, the results of that ballot question, which is, we'll see when we get there. We'll see what this will look like in practice, without revealing a lot of details about kind of. Yeah, where they stand and what they mean.
Can we get back to the governor in a minute? Because I want to talk about some of your reporting here. Sam, what we can debate, and we will get your thoughts about, while they were the least productive legislature in America at the beginning of the session, did they change that dramatically at the end of the session? The one thing I think is clear is they remain as... Is untransparent a word? As untransparent
opaque,
as virtually opaque as anybody. And as we know, I cite him all the time. Todd Wallach, who used to be the Globe, he's now at BUR, wrote the original story saying the only state in America where all 3 branches of government claim exemption from public records laws. You wrote about this state rep who I never heard of, I don't think, Jeff Roy. Mm-hmm. And he has a girlfriend who's a big-time lobbyist. And he files a piece of paper quietly. You guys come upon it, or we wouldn't know about it. He doesn't even name who this person is. Mm-hmm. And it's a good example of what happens. We've spoken to Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, for months about her desire to get rid of third-party electricity because she thinks it screws consumers. Yeah. The governor supported getting rid of it. Mm-hmm. Tons of organizations supported getting rid of it. Mayor Wu supported getting rid of it. And lo and behold, it wasn't gotten rid of because of this legislator, Jeff Roy. And lo and behold, who's the chief lobbyist for one of the biggest third-party electric companies? His girlfriend. Mm-hmm. This is technically legal, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, as long as these lawmakers file these disclosures, they're covered. It's not illegal. Ethically, he's covered, and so that disclosure kind of goes a long way. But I think that the bill and kind of his partner's relationship with lobbying for this legislation raises a lot of questions about how much a disclosure goes and whether that really dissolves the conflict of interest there.
Well, so this is another question you may not be able to answer editorially. Is it, if I were the Speaker of the House, which luckily for the people of Massachusetts I am not, I would say, Jeff, Roy, you got to step aside. I'm going to give you another plum assignment so you can make another bonus like almost every legislator does, including, as you guys pointed out, legislators who chair committees who never meet get these bonuses, which is really staggering. Is the reason why there hasn't been a reaction to something that, even if it isn't technically illegal, stinks to high heaven, is because they don't need to do anything about it because there's not going to be any blowback? Is that what it is?
I mean, I can't say, as to why there hasn't been, a big reaction from leadership on this. Representative Roy's been in the House for a long time. Committee assignments have yet to be announced for this legislative session, so I think that will be revealing. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I can't opine on kind of where the Speaker's head is at on what kind of decision he'll make. Roy, but he has told us that he does a good job on this issue. He's really smart on this issue, and he's passed a lot of bills that have been.
And he doesn't talk to his girlfriend about any of these issues. He says, correct?
That is what he says.
That is what he says.
Well, on the other side of it, going to the other body of authority that could have an impact on this, is do you get anything from the State Ethics Commission that they are concerned, where leadership doesn't step in and do something that maybe they ought to strengthen the reporting laws, or maybe ought to promulgate a rule or a law that says that this cannot happen. You simply cannot, not that you can't have the relationship, because you have a First Amendment right to do that, but that you simply cannot ride herd on a committee where someone that you share a life with has an undue influence.
Yeah, I mean, the State Ethics Commission has not weighed in on this kind of since our story.
That's amazing.
But there was, an investigation that had opened into this relationship, before it was, dismissed. There was no wrongdoing found, and so that's kind of as far as they've gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do these people, we were speaking to I think you both worked for Brian McGraw. You were both there when Brian was there? We were speaking to Brian the other day, who's obviously head of the journalism thing at BU the other. By the way, since Marjorie's not here, you always have to say about Matt Stout, formerly of the Herald. You always have to say that when Matt's here. Marjorie, if you're listening, I did it, so let's move on. Do these people talk to you? I mean, I was just reading a story, one of the stories about this Representative Chairman Roy, and Joe Bearline, who's been around forever, very respected guy, his spokesperson, Joe Bearline. When you reach out to the Speaker or the chair, do they talk to you anymore, or is it all statements and through spokespeople? Starting with you, Sam.
I mean, reaching out usually is responded with a statement, but we've been able to reach folks at events. I was able to speak to Chairman Roy to ask the questions directly to him at a bill signing. I think we're able to have access to them in those forums. But yeah, I mean, I speak for myself. I have not been able to get on the phone with Chairman Roy or the Speaker on this issue.
What's your experience, Matt, about any of this stuff? Can you move your mic up just about an inch, if you don't mind? That's fine.
Oh, there we go.
That's perfect.
Is that
Thank
better?
you. Yeah.
I guess this has always been the case. You have your kind of select opportunities to talk to, whether it be the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, whether they have events publicly in the State House, outside the State House. I mean, that's where you sort of get your, you take your shots and you try to get your questions in that you want to get answered. So, I mean, sometimes not sometimes, it's dictated by the schedule and us.
But it doesn't have to be. I don't mean, again, I know you can't. It seems to me, if an issue is raised by your reporting in the case, so I don't mean to belabor the Jeff Roy thing, but since we're talking about it, if an issue is raised where I think the average person on the street would say, that troubles me, that's at least the appearance of impropriety, it would seem to me catching him at a bill signing is not, I'm not criticizing you, in the public interest. If you're interested in hearing what his response is to having his girlfriend be the chief lobbyist for a bill that he killed, and other bills, by the way, it would seem to me that the responsible, you're a former public official, is pick up the damn phone and answer your questions if you have nothing to hide. I'm just going to ask you if it drives you nuts. You can't answer that.
I mean, you're talking to us. Of course, we'd always want to talk directly to the people that we're writing about. I mean, sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I've never worked on the PR side, so I'm not, I'm not one to start giving advice on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we always try our best effort to talk to the people that are the the people that we're writing about. And,
we're talking to Matt Stout and Samantha Gross, who do fabulous reporting on the State House for the Boston Globe.
And as thoroughly annoying as I found it when I was an elected official, and yes, Matt, you did annoy me on a number of occasions. Figured I'd let you know. The public records exemption part of this would enable you, would it not, to get them to talk to you, because once they know you have a document, they kind of have to. What I'm basically saying is, isn't it kind of tied together? The sort of lack of transparency in terms of access to documents goes along with the inaccessibility for the one-on-one. And Samantha, feel free to weigh in as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, all the offices that you headed, I mean, you were subject to public records law. But,
right.
you know, we live in a state...
Which is why I had to talk to you and you kept annoying me. Yeah.
But yeah, we live in a state where the legislature, the governor's office itself, the judiciary, aren't subject to public records law, which, yeah, I mean, really closes a lot of doors to not just, get the underlying documents, but, to have reasons like, hey, yeah, we have this. Can you help explain it?
To just get information.
It's just get information.
Yeah.
I mean, that does go a long way. I think when we kind of talk about this, like, bigger discussion about transparency at the state level, like, you cannot talk about it without, like, that maybe being the first thing that you're pointing to, because that's a major thing that is, normal here, but is not normal so many other places.
Well, again, we're the only state in the country where all three branches claim exemption from public records laws.
And only Michigan is the other one.
The only other two that have the governor and the legislature. And Michigan legislature was on the cusp of passing a law. They didn't for other reasons, but they almost passed a law subjecting their governor and legislature in December, but it didn't happen. So.
Sam Gross, at the beginning of the session, I think it's fair, and if I get this wrong, obviously you'll correct me. I think you guys wrote least productive, it's been voted or rated the least productive legislature in America, least transparent, etc. In fairness to them, at the last minute, even though not a lot of it had roll calls or enough time for the legislators to even read what they were told to vote on, they did do some significant things on their way out the door during the so-called, well, I call their vacation. They call their informal informal session. They did, correct?
Yeah, they came back in informal sessions, and there were some starts and stops there for a little bit with the Republicans able to kind of stop votes, and they had to reconvene with a quorum. But they did come back and they passed major legislation, and so that's what they'll point to when there's criticism. Like you said, Massachusetts is the least productive legislature in the country. We come and ask these questions about when are you guys gonna, do this or that, and they'll point to the informal session, and say we came back and we did pass these things, and so they use that as a marker. I think it does kind of set a tone for what future sessions will look like, and whether the deadline for formal lawmaking is really a real deadline anymore, and kind of how that may shift.
Well, the future Speaker of the House, in all likelihood, as the House Ways and Means Chair, has basically said some things about we're going to take a look at some of our procedures to be more transparent. Is that's what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you should know, I guess, in a couple of weeks here about what that actually looks like. But that's unclear too, how they're going to change the rules. But it seems like there's appetite, to do that.
Yeah, to change deadlines, and also to open up parts of the conference committees which are closed to the public as of now. And they've kind of made these statements. So we'll see what that actually looks like when they change the rules, if they do.
Sam, you and I think her name is Julia McDonald, and also Nieto Del Rio wrote a piece about one of Trump's talk about a flurry of action. One of Trump's executive orders doing away with 2 Biden-era programs that he created as a result of executive orders. First, explain a little bit about what his rescinding of these orders does to folks who came into the country legally. And when you're done with that, I want to talk to you about how baffled I am at this idea that he thinks he can, by executive order, make a law that people have complied with. He can eliminate that retroactively, but start first by telling people what this means for millions of people.
Yeah, so the executive order that you're referring to was a kind of a memo, a directive to end the CBP One app, which a lot of people use to schedule appointments to come across the border legally and go through that process, and a lot of folks do that. It really opened up access to kind of this program that is really hard to navigate, especially on paper when a lot of folks are traveling up through northern Mexico. The other piece is the CHNV program, which allows for humanitarian parole for folks from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. A lot of the people, immigrants that I've met in Boston and in Massachusetts in the shelter system are here on humanitarian parole, which means that they've left their country for circumstances that, are dangerous politically, economically, et cetera. And so what this does is it puts a lot of people in limbo. They don't know exactly, if they're going to...
Because they're working. They've gotten permission to work while their thing is being processed.
Right. They have humanitarian parole, which means that they're able to apply for work permits. They're, allowed to live here. They're allowed to access, federal benefits, like food stamps and other things. And so, it throws a lot of folks in limbo, especially people who have been here for, more than a year, 2 years, and are working their way through the system. The immigration courts here and across the country are so backlogged that it can take years to work their way through.
Speaking of immigration, while you're standing here, you published a story that was quite magical. D.C. is going to play politics. Woo Healey responded to congressional probe of Boston, a sanctuary city for immigrants. The news mentioned that Healey is one of the 4 mayors who's been asked to testify in front of Congress. Woo, I'm sorry. Yeah. Is she committed to showing up, or what's the deal?
So as far as I know, when I walked into the studio, they were reading over the letter that the mayor's office was sent. I think that maybe the story had updated with some information from Mayor Woo, who had a press conference about this afternoon that my colleague Emma was at, Emma Platoff at the Globe. That's big news, kind of targeting Boston among the 4 cities, with Denver, Chicago, and New York as mayors to come and defend their so-called sanctuary policies.
By the way, not to be outdone, her story posted 13 minutes ago. Matt's story on the NDAs posted 21 minutes ago. And by the way, you mentioned Emma Platoff. The 3 of you and whoever else, this State Secret project, these series was extraordinary about taking God knows who to these cigar bars. We don't even find out who they are. Lobbyist spouses, what they can say, pork for the leaders, but not so much for the rank and files. I just have one last thing for you. Elise Cherry, the head of Blue Hub, was supposed to be on with us yesterday, and we canceled. And to her credit, she was coming on. We canceled because Marjorie wasn't here, and there wasn't enough time for Shirely Leung, your colleague who filled in, to prepare. A very quick summary of this. There was a provision that was fiercely opposed by the Attorney General, that was in the Economic Development Bill. No roll call, no debate on the floor is what I understand. Passed by the legislature, signed by Governor Healey, that benefited one company and one company only, even though it's not named, a shared appreciation mortgage company. It exempted them from consumer protection laws, and the Attorney General has said there's no other company that she's aware of in the whole state that is subject to consumer protection, exempt from consumer protection laws. She's a major donor and close friend of Healey's. We asked Governor Healey about it. Why did you sign it? I asked her. She said, because it's a great bill. Why did she sign this in your estimation, Matt Stout?
I mean, she also told you, I think, that day that she didn't have the option to veto, which my understanding of money bills like that, she does.
She could have vetoed a provision. I didn't come back at that.
Why she signed? I mean, I think the same reason she kind of gave us is that she kind of looked at the bill in totality and signed the entire bill. There wasn't like she was slicing and dicing from that bill, that being among the sections.
One last thing you may not know about, and again, we'll bring this up with Elise Cherry when she reschedules with us, and we've given her a ton of dates in February. Both the governor and the attorney, there's a lawsuit that's been pending for 5 years, which I know from borrowers who felt that they were defrauded and not told everything. I asked, in a brief filed by the Attorney General, she said this law is not retroactive. The governor on our show said it was not retroactive, yet Elise Cherry's lawyers filed a motion 2 days after the law was signed by the governor saying it is retroactive. We should wipe out the whole lawsuit retroactively. Do you have has Healey had anything to say about this other than what she said to us? Do you know?
Not since that brief was filed by the AG's office. I believe that, typically the governor and the AG kind of fall in line, but we haven't spoken to her about it since. But they had a court date on the 15th, and so I assume that it's progressing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. The work you guys have done is spectacular. I mean, it really is an important, huge public service, and we really appreciate you giving us a half hour of your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you
so much. Appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Samantha Gross and Matt Stout, political reporters at the Boston Globe. Coming up after a quick break, Jim and I will bring you 2 more things for today. The stories that couldn't fit in elsewhere, but we thought were important to share. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In the 1960s, the Navy built undersea habitats hundreds of feet below the surface and sent aquanauts down for a look.
None of this had ever been done before. We all felt like we were the lab rats, but we were all young and thought we were invincible.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly, the forgotten history of the Sea Lab project on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Cambridge Savings Bank, where they are committed to your financial well-being, and community is at the core of everything they do. Cambridge Savings Bank, always you. More at cambridgesavings.com. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie's out today, not feeling great. She's feeling well enough to return tomorrow on Zoom. Andrea Cabral is kind enough to be sitting in again today. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Before we start this, I should have said one of the reasons Samantha Gross is such a fabulous reporter for the Globe is she was Jamie's student at BU. That, I think, is that Jamie, our lead producer. Look at him, he's turned red. In any case, it's now time for two more things where Andrea and I share something from the news. Didn't really fit in today's show, but matters to us. Andrea, you go first.
Well, my thing is that Trump ordered a freeze on the Civil Rights Division.
Yep.
He appointed...
At the Justice Department, is that where
It's in the Department of Justice. Harmeet Dillon is the new appointee for the Civil Rights Division. It is one of the most important divisions in the Department of Justice. The person who previously helmed it was a woman named Kristen Clark. She prosecuted more than 180 police officers for civil rights abuses. She went after the officers who killed Breonna Taylor. She got convictions for the 3 men who lynched Ahmaud Arbery. It's a pivotal part of the Department of Justice. He has now stopped them from filing any briefs, even amicus curiae briefs, until further notice. He's also going to reconsider the police reform settlements that are in dozens of police departments across the country, settlements that were designed to make the police department more equitable and to keep policing on an even keel. He may reconsider them and retract them. People should know, even if you look at this and you say, well, those things don't affect me, I'm not part of the group that was prosecuted, you should know it's only a matter of time before your civil rights are affected as well.
Well, I got one that will affect them. Do you know what PFAS are, everybody? These are called forever chemicals. Donald Trump, I think it was yesterday, stopped plans to place limits on the discharge from corporate America of PFAS into the water you drink. Now, let me repeat that. It's not rhetoric. He stopped plans, ended the Biden plan to place limits on the discharge of these forever chemicals. Let me tell you some of the health problems they can lead to. Liver damage, thyroid disease, obesity, fertility issues, and cancer. There'll be no more limit on the discharge.
Dysfunction.
Is that true?
Yes.
I didn't. Well, that's probably the most important thing to most of his supporters. In any case, the significant thing of that is just that he has authorized essentially the poisoning of America's water. That's true. Here's what's equally, if not more significant. Lee Zeldin, we talked about the other day, he's the new head, will be the new head of the EPA. I don't think he's been confirmed yet. And Marjorie and I complimented him because he said he actually believed in climate change. Here's what he said when he was asked about PFAS and how much he would focus on them, if at all, when he's head of the EPA.
Working with all of you to deal with these issues in your home state is something that will be top priority of mine.
So, okay, top priority of his, but let me do this. It's a top priority of Donald Trump's pick to be the head of the EPA, but Donald Trump has already said we're going to eliminate any limits on the discharge of PFAS. What's your takeaway from that apparent conflict, Andrea Cabral?
Oh, Mr. Zeldin, whether he knows it or not, is merely a figurehead because Donald Trump has consolidated all of federal government under one executive power, and that would be him.
He's essentially the head of the EPA.
And that is not a democracy, right? That is not a democracy.
And so for those of us who are foolish enough, like me and Marjorie, to celebrate the fact that Zeldin, he's a former congressperson from New York, had the courage at the hearing, because it obviously wouldn't please Trump, to say, I believe in climate change, I'm going to deal with it as best I can. It apparently meant nothing, because as long as the boss says, I don't believe in climate change, and I don't believe in protecting your drinking water from the discharge of forever chemicals, then it doesn't really matter at all. what you think. What kind of people decide, I'm going to take a high position and then be humiliated a minute and a half later, like Zeldin in this case?
Oh, you could ask that about how many dozens of people that have come through the pipeline.
Okay, that was two more things.
That was two more things.
It was two more things.
And we'll have two more things tomorrow. But until then, we will take a break. And we'll be back with John King. He's the pride of Dorchester. It's time for the 1 o'clock news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Join us at our next Stories from the Stage Valentine's Day soiree on February 14th. Enjoy magnificent stories inspired by love and share in this splendid evening with friends and loved ones. Tickets at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Trinity Rep, presenting Someone Will Remember Us. This moving new play is based on the real-life testimonies of U.S. military veterans, a Gold Star family, Iraqi civilians, and refugees living in Rhode Island. Now through February 23rd. TrinityRep.com. And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Saints, Sinners, Lovers, and Fools, 300 years of Flemish masterworks. On view this winter. For tickets, you can visit pem.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Has any president in American history caused more chaos in just 9 days than Donald Trump? CNN chief national correspondent John King zooms in to try to answer that question.
I'm Andrea Cabral, filling in for Marjorie Egan. We'll close out the show opening up phone and text lines to talk about eggs. Prices are high, even if we're not hearing an outcry about it on the right anymore. Before bird flu makes chickens a thing of the past, what is the best way to eat an egg? Are eggs all they're cracked up to be? And what are you replacing eggs with?
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. NPR has obtained an internal memo from the White House's Office of Management and Budget that calls for a halt in federal grants, loans, and financial assistance programs. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports a senior administration official characterizes the directive as a pause and not a full funding freeze.
I mean, I have it here. This is a very broad freeze in spending, even if it is just temporary. I mean, we are talking about billions, if not trillions of dollars in financial assistance programs across a wide range of research and education programs.
NPR's Franco Ordonez. President Trump signed an executive order yesterday aimed at banning transgender people from serving openly in the military. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin reports LGBTQ advocacy groups have already vowed to sue.
The order comes as no surprise. Trump promised many times on the campaign trail to get trans people out of the military. It was unclear from the text of the order what the details of the policy will be. It appears to apply to everyone with a gender dysphoria diagnosis, from those who would like to enlist to those who are already serving. Patricia King, a transgender Army veteran, says she hopes the ban will be blocked by the courts as illegal and discriminatory, but in the meantime, trans service members are scared.
There are questions about who will be allowed to serve, for how long. If you're a trans person who is allowed to stay, will you be allowed to be promoted? Will there be potential for harassment?
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has 30 days to develop a policy to implement the order. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News, Washington.
Questions about Trump's executive orders could be raised this hour when the White House holds its first press briefing of this Trump administration. Denmark's prime minister visits key leaders across Europe today in a bid to shore up support against President Trump's campaign to seize Greenland. NPR's Rob Schmitz has details.
President Trump has become increasingly fixated on claiming Greenland and has not ruled out using military force or economic coercion to take it from Denmark. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Berlin, French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Brussels in a whirlwind day of international diplomacy. This came after meetings with other Nordic leaders on Sunday evening. The Danish government announced Monday a new $2 billion defense package for 3 new Arctic ships, additional long-range drones, and strengthening of satellite capacity. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Nasdaq is up 334 points, or 1.7%, at 19,676. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro.
Also making headlines.
Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has been called on to testify at an upcoming congressional hearing investigating sanctuary cities. GBH's Tori Bedford reports that Wu and 3 other mayors who have been accused of obstructing the enforcement of federal immigration laws.
In a letter, Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, Representative James Comer, asked Wu to testify about, quote, misguided and obstructionist policies in refusing to fully cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. Comer asked Wu to provide documents and information about Boston's sanctuary city policies and appear at the hearing on February 11th, along with mayors from New York, Chicago, and Denver. Wu has continued to encourage Boston residents to protect their undocumented neighbors and to not cooperate with immigration raids or other efforts to spread fear in immigrant communities. Tori Bedford, GBH News, 89.7.
Josh Kraft, the son of New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, has filed the paperwork to run for mayor of Boston. The filing is his first official move towards making a run for mayor and challenging Mayor Michelle Wu at the same time. Meanwhile, it's back to City Hall for Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. The Globe and GBH News reporting that she and the new baby Mira will attend a cabinet meeting today. Wu made it clear from the beginning that she would not be taking much of a maternity leave. In sports, the Bruins are shuffling off to Buffalo tonight for a game against the Sabres. We are at 32 degrees outside our studios in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Marjorie Egan is a little bit under the weather, but not so under the weather. She's not returning tomorrow, but she will return via Zoom tomorrow to the library. I'll be here. Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, former Sheriff of Suffolk County, is filling in today. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello again, Jim.
We are live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, who I think I was told is in Lincoln, Nebraska. John, good to see you.
Happy Tuesday. Greetings from the heartland.
Why are you there?
To look at some of this immigration enforcement that Trump is doing. What we've seen is a lot. We've seen in Chicago, you have the Boston mayor being called to defend sanctuary cities to Congress. I wanted to come to a red state. Here you have a Republican governor who has said he will use state resources to help ICE, to help the Trump administration. You also have mayors in both Lincoln, where I am, and in Omaha saying we're staying out of that. That's a federal responsibility. There's a resolution passed in Omaha saying that, they don't check anyone's immigration status when they come to school. They say that's a federal responsibility. Their job is to educate children. So we see it playing out in blue cities and blue states so far, but I wanted to come to a red state where, whether you look at the meatpacking industry in Omaha, the farming industry across Nebraska, migrants, workers are incredibly important here. Visas are incredibly important here. And yes, people don't like to talk about it publicly, but there's a sizable undocumented population here. So we're actually going to meet with a couple of immigrants here while we're here, and then some public officials to try to get a sense of how this one element of what we've seen as a blizzard of Trump activity is going to play out in a red state.
John, after the absolutely inexplicable and disgraceful confirmation of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, we're now looking at developments for the RFK and Chelsea Gabbard confirmations, possibly. What's the latest on those? What is the status?
Well, there's a new letter today from Caroline Kennedy that is just vicious in the description of her cousin, RFK Jr. She blames him for the drug addictions and troubles of several other family members, saying he was so charismatic and so persuasive that he led many other members of the family down the path of drug abuse. And she says he's just been out to enrich himself by associating himself with causes that she disagrees with. She says he's a hypocrite, that he criticizes vaccines, but all his children are vaccinated. It's vicious. Now, does Caroline Kennedy have any sway over Republican senators? That's the question. I do think when you get to Tulsi Gabbard and you get to Robert F. Kennedy, some say Kash Patel, the president's nominee for FBI director, but most Republicans seem pretty loyal to him, even though he has been so harshly critical of the agency he's about to lead. I would say this. I think I said this the first week to Jim and Marjorie. Establishment politicians say, oh, my God, look at these people. And Trump says, yes, exactly. I ran against the establishment. I'm going to name different kinds of people. I would keep an eye on Kennedy. You've had Lisa Murkowski raise some questions, Susan Collins in Maine. They were both against Hegseth, as was Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, of course, a polio survivor, a big fan of the polio vaccine, says it saved his life. So you have 3 right there. You only need 4. Right? You only need 4. So if McConnell is against RFK or against Tulsi Gabbard, McConnell is very big on these national security issues. I think Trump has a number of, shall we say, I'll use a neutral word, interesting picks outside of McConnell's mainstream there. So I do think there's a chance. I also think that the Trump outside political allies have been very aggressive and very effective so far in essentially warning Republicans, if you cross the president here, you will pay for it.
You know, John, go ahead, I'm sorry. Andrew.
I was just going to say, let me ask you, when Trump says, when people, establishment politicians say, look at this person, and I say, yeah, look at this person, I'm nominating different people, Tulsi Gabbard is widely acknowledged to be a Russian asset. I mean, that's not, I'm bringing somebody who's outside the box. That's trying to put someone in charge of a national security agency who is a threat to national security. What does your reporting tell you? What's the response to that by people who would still support her and vote for her?
Well, what you've had, Andrea, as this plays out, is you're absolutely right. Whether they would say she's a Russian asset or certainly in her conversations about Russian issues and about Syria and meeting with Assad and so on, that she's way outside the mainstream of America, the American mainstream, never mind the liberal or the conservative mainstream. She's outside the American mainstream. What a lot of these Republicans have said is I'm going to bite my tongue and I'm going to stay quiet and I'm going to really hope that something comes up in the background check, or that Democrats ask really great questions at these confirmation hearings and knock her off her game, or that one of the Republican, I'll call them mavericks. You shouldn't be a maverick for asking questions, basic questions about American national security. But, does a Collins, does a Murkowski, does a McConnell, McConnell himself is in position on these committees. Do they ask the tough questions as well? What a lot of the Republicans who privately would tell you, I don't think this person is qualified, whether that's an RFK or a Tulsi Gabbard, they're hoping that other people do the work for them, essentially, because they don't want to get caught in Trump's crosshairs. But I would put her especially, followed by RFK, as if 1 or 2 of these are going to go down, they would be atop the list.
One last thing about the confirmation hearings. You mentioned Mitch McConnell is the 3rd vote against Pete Hegseth, which made it a tie, which was broken by Vice President J.D. Vance. I'm not the political historian that you are. Was Mitch McConnell did he ever stand up to Trump when he had power to bring people along with him when he was the Republican leader, or is now that he doesn't have that power, he's just speaking for himself? Is this the first time he's done something like this?
I think he feels he has a lot more personal freedom, Jim, now that he's not the leader. That when he's the leader, he's supposed to represent the party. That doesn't mean he didn't disagree with Trump publicly at times. It doesn't mean he didn't have on, what should be in the budget resolution, what should be in legislation, that he, made sure that things that Trump wanted didn't happen, or that there was less money for it, or things like that in the past. But I think he feels now that he can vote as an individual Republican senator. And when he had the title of leader, he thought he had to essentially bury that, put that aside.
John King, I read a quote before from Politico. I think it was local Politico. I'm not sure. It may have been national. From our Senator Ed Markey saying Donald Trump is going to create a reaction in our country to his climate denial policies that will be massive by the end of this spring, which seems like a long time away. Before the end of spring, is there a Democratic, I don't mean an individual Democrat, is there a Democratic strategy about how to deal with maybe the most active 9 days I ever remember of a new president, and arguably 9 days where he's attempted to, at least Andrea and I believe, rip down the government that he's ahead of? Is there a Democratic strategy, or are they just waiting?
I think you see a variety of strategies. I think you see some governors out there who are being impacted, criticizing these things. I think both Massachusetts senators, you've seen Senator Markey on climate issues. Senator Warren has been very aggressive on spending issues, priority issues, and to some of the points Andrea was just making. I think that you're going to, in this first period, and let's just take the first 100 days of the Trump administration, I do think you're going to watch Democrats who have different agreements. Like on immigration issues, a lot of Democrats say, I'm willing to be tougher. I may not be willing to go as far as Trump wants to do. I'd like to do some things. Mr. President, can we please have a bipartisan conversation? Right now, the president's answer is no. I'm going to do it my way. And so does he get so far out there that he loses potential allies on some of these issues? Democrats did learn a lesson in the last election on immigration, but I do think that they think some of what Trump is doing, they would argue, and this stuff's going to be tied up in the courts for months, if not years. They argue that he's, whether it's the federal freeze on spending, whether it's some of the immigration moves, are these unconstitutional? But there's a broad debate, Jim, to try to answer your question, because I don't have a good answer among Democrats as to whether we should be in the fight every day or whether we should let some of this stuff actually get root and watch what they believe will be the devastation of it and then say, I told you so. But the party just lost the last election. After you lose an election, this is what happens. Some people are vocal from the beginning. Other people are kind of sitting back saying, I want to study this a little bit.
Talking to John King from CNN.
John, what I've been wondering is if this is actually part of the strategy, because you and I had this conversation about, I likened it to buying a new car where depreciation starts immediately right after you drive it off the lot, and that the midterms are right around the corner. And wouldn't the GOP be concerned about being held responsible in the midterms if they went as whole hog as they seem to be? You just made the point that these things are going to be tied up in the courts for years. So don't you could it possibly be their strategy that you get the benefit of putting it all out there in this tidal wave and getting it before the public? This is what I'm trying to do, but not having to deal with the actual result, which is what Americans will push back on when it actually starts to happen until after the midterms. Is that possible?
I think in some cases you're right, but Trump is doing so much on so many issues right now that even if things are tied up in the courts, if you win, if the Democrats or the critics, let's just say there will be mostly Democrats, but if the critics, some of these nonprofit groups, some of these foreign aid groups, some of these other organizations, if they can win a stay that stops the policy, then Trump says he signed something and he tried to do what he wanted to do, but then he was stopped by the courts, and you fight it up the system. Assume some of this stuff, actually gets to take effect. You have a lot of these Republicans, Andrea, are in a box in the sense that you have vulnerable House Republicans or some Senate Republicans who are at least in purple-ish states who think, whoa, some of this might be just a bridge too far for me. But if they stand up and criticize it now, Trump will run a primary opponent against them in the midterms. And so they could lose their seat in the primary. If they bite their tongue and let it take hold, and it is too much for the constituents back where they live, whether that's a House district or a Senate, a statewide electorate in a Senate race, well, then they get whacked. If they don't speak up, they survive. There's no primary challenge, and they're on the ballot. Maybe Trump has, poisoned the well, if you will, and they have a tough, if not an unwinnable, reelection campaign. We're just a week in. It's hard to believe, but we're just 8 days in. But these conversations are happening among Republicans. They're hoping that Trump just has this burst because he came into power and he just wants to jump up and down and wave the flag every day. And I don't say that even with disrespect. He won the election. Whether you agree or disagree, he's trying to do the things he campaigned on. They hope that it calms down. I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case. And to the other question, Trump himself cannot be on the ballot. Although he mused maybe he can be. It's never been tested before at this House Republican retreat the other day.
Well, Ogles filed a bill to give him a third term, Andy Ogles.
Yeah. Right. Let's assume for today he's not on the ballot. A lot of Republicans worry about that it's hard to have a conversation with him about his own political standing because he either doesn't care or it doesn't matter. Let's be honest, even a lot of Republicans who vote with Donald Trump on everything will tell you privately they understand he mostly cares about him and not so much about them.
We're talking to John King from CNN. It does seem like ancient history, but while, as you said, he said he was going to do what he's doing, and he's doing it, I guess an exception, I would say, I don't remember him saying, when I pardon a lot of the so-called J6 hostages, otherwise known as convicted felon insurrectionists, I'm going to pardon those people who tried to kill or at least injure law enforcement people. Is this ancient history for most MAGA types, including people in Congress? because it was so many days ago and there have been scores of other things that he's done or proposed since? Or does this have some potential staying power, John King?
That's one example where Republicans are actually grateful he's done a whole bunch of other controversial things, so they can talk about those and not about that. Look, on this one, on pardoning the January 6th, those convicted of January 6th offenses that included violence, including violence against police officers. His own vice president, J.D. Vance, said, "Don't do it, sir." The Speaker of the House said, "Don't do it, sir. That's a bridge too far." Now he's done it. And so J.D. Vance is saying it's done. I think he said yesterday we were correcting a wrong or righting a wrong or something like that. So he's now gotten on Team Trump on that issue, even though he was on the record in a different place. Is it forgotten? Republicans want to forget about it. They want to forget that day happened. They're trying to whitewash the history of that day and move on. I do think that this is one of the issues, Jim, that's going to come up in the midterm elections when you start to see the Democratic ads of "this is not what you voted for." And XYZ is a House Republican or XYZ is a Senate Republican who went along with this. That'll be one of them. You're going to see the pictures of, unfortunately, but you're going to see ads of police officers being beaten and Democrats saying, "That's not what you voted for. You didn't vote to pardon these people." And XYZ stood by and let it happen. That's guaranteed to be in the midterm ads. The question is, again, we're 8 days in. What else?
Well, what also goes along with that is that, along with the pardons, is the rescinding of security protection and security details for some of the very people who, Mike Pence being one of them, who were essentially threatened with death at his incitement, by the way, or threatened with bodily harm at his incitement. He's taken away their security detail and has apparently said he is not concerned with anything his supporters might do to break through that security and harm them.
Well, that I think you would put in the stack of, he said at one point, "I am your retribution." And we know that he has grievances and he goes after his critics. In the case of Dr. Fauci, the NIH was funding a security detail for Dr. Fauci. That's now gone. Dr. Fauci has hired a private security firm. We'll see how long he wants to expend the money to do that, or whether he tries to raise some money to pay for that, because it's not cheap. Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, who has been somewhat critical of Trump, but he's not harshly critical of Trump. That one is fascinating to me. There's something there that's beyond what Pompeo has said publicly. There's obviously something else there with Trump to take that detail away. Again, crickets from Republicans. Right. And Trump has said it's it's been long enough and everything's fine and they'll be okay. And to your point, I'm not worried about anything happening to them. In the case of some, it's just one of the things he does. He's done so much that I think the president's team, even those who might think, "Oh, I don't know about that one," just think that people will forget about that, because they're this is one of the reasons they're doing these made-for-TV ICE roundups, is to get things on video that people that they think by and large would have majority support, and then the other stuff is done without a camera, and I don't think you're going to see Dr. Fauci out there or Mike Pompeo out there complaining about it. And let's just hope that their safety remains, that they remain safe. But it's in this buzz of activity, there's things he campaigned on, and then there's things I guess you would put in the vindictive or retribution column, and I think I would put the security issue there.
John, can we go back to this beginning of this conversation where you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, essentially to take a look in a red state about what the mass deportation plans, proposals are going to mean? There was a really interesting story one of your colleagues did on CNN the other day, Kai Law, with a cattle farmer, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I'm sure you saw it, who says he's got a lot of undocumented work. Oh, he voted for Trump, still supports Trump. And I'll give the short version because it's a long, very comprehensive and good story. Essentially says, if all of my undocumented workers were deported, I'd go out of business. I'd go bankrupt. I support Trump. Do you encounter that? Is there this denial of reality, or is it just this prayer that he's going to do what I voted for him to do, but not going to do the things that are going to hurt me? I don't know if I articulated that well, but that was a wonderful example. Go ahead.
No, I get your point. I do think there are a lot of people who voted for Trump who think that he's going to do this up to a point, and then he's going to stop because he's going to think he made his point. And then he's going to get, border security provisions from Congress, and he's going to get some sort of new visa program. There are others who think that, there are some Trump supporters, including in the farm industry I've spoken to, who think Trump will get to a certain point, and then, this will allow him, once he can say, I deported so many, it will allow him to say, now we're going to have a visa program, to make this, to have a system, a process, a legal process to fill all this. I don't think we know the answer to that question. I would say this too, that for all the made-for-TV movement around this so far, and it's only 8 days in, the numbers of deportations are not that significantly higher than they were in the final weeks and months of the Biden administration. It's
true.
You're just seeing them. You're just seeing them because they are televising the raids and they are showing. You're getting to see the flights going out. That doesn't mean they're not going to increase. The president's board czar, Tom Homan, has said he needs more money from Congress to keep that going, and the Republicans, I think, are going to try to give Trump that money. But I do think, Jim, that is one of the big questions. So a month from now, 3 months from now, maybe it's 6 months from now, does Trump reach a point where he says, I've made my point here, and now we're going to reform the system, and these countries are going to know don't send people in illegally, and we're going to have a process for people to come in legally, which many of his supporters, when I was traveling last year, I was struck by how many Trump supporters were vehement about illegal immigration, and then in the next breath said, but please, we need a system. These are good people. They want jobs, and we need them here. We just need a legal process to do it. Can he manage that? Or does he inflame tensions and partisanship so much with the enforcement out of the box that it's impossible to have a political conversation later? I don't know the answer to that question, and I think it really depends on what happens over the next 100 days or so.
John, in our last couple of minutes, can you just give a brief rundown of what happened with Trump in Colombia this week, and also talk about, to the extent that you know, how our allies, our other allies, because Colombia is one of our allies, how our other allies are reacting to Trump's treatment of Colombia?
So I think that, number one, they're all going to analyze what the Colombian president did, because what the Colombian president did after this social media back and forth, you have two, if you want to call them populists or nationalists in Trump and the Colombian president, they were fighting it out on social media, and the Colombian president essentially blinked and said, we don't want them coming home on U.S. military planes. We don't like the optics of that. So we will send our own planes to bring them home. So they'll come home on Colombian government planes or charter planes instead of U.S. military transport planes. So the Colombian president thinks that's a win for him in the end because of the optics. And Trump has backed off on the tariffs, saying, OK, I got what I wanted. You're going to take them and you're going to continue to take them. Therefore, I got what I wanted. So I think one of the questions is that the Trump team says that it works. The Trump team says, sure, you're going to call me a bully. Sure, you're going to call me, I'm grandstanding about this. But their take on that is that it worked. The Colombia blinked, and they're going to keep taking the migrants back.
So that tariffs, so that they don't have to deal with tariffs.
Yes. So they don't have to deal with an economic war back and forth. Now, the American people would have suffered some in that too had it taken play. But that's one where Team Trump could say, see, we threaten these tariffs, we kind of pound our chest a little bit, and we win. The question will be, does that if that continues country to country in Central and South America, does it continue, or is there a push comes to shove somewhere? There's been some tension with the Mexican government, but by and large, Mexico so far has said, we understand this remain in Mexico policy, and we're going to try to make it work. I think, again, we're 8 days in. Team Trump is happy right now, 8 days in. I think we have to keep looking at this question, 20 days in, 30 days in, 3 and 6 months in to see how it plays out. But they are happy at the moment, and they think sometimes the bluster that makes a lot of Trump critics groan, they say it's working.
Well, yeah, it's working if you don't care about having a relationship with allies. I mean, obviously it worked in Colombia. I put worked in quotes, but I'm assuming the leader of Colombia is not feeling really great about the United States and its president right now. Would you not agree?
I would agree. And I think you add, not that Colombia is not an important economic partner of the United States. If you see some of the language the president has had toward Mexico and Canada, and then project that across the Atlantic, some of the language he's had about the European Union, whether it's the European Union as an economic partner or whether it's the NATO allies who happen to be within the European Union. The president says a lot of things that tick off longtime traditional U.S. allies. And again, his argument is we're going to do things differently. There's a new sheriff in town. Their argument is, oh, my God, get over yourself. Why don't we do this politely? We can actually work most of this stuff out if we had polite conversations. So I think the Canada and the Mexico issue is going to come to a head in the relatively near future. They're our neighbors. They're our biggest economic partners. They're our friends. The one to the north is not the 51st state, and they take quite a bit of offense when the president keeps saying that. So I do think, again, we're 8 days in, and there's a lot of tension, a lot of crackling tension in the air. And as these things each individually come to a head, we're going to have to watch them and see how they play out.
John, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Next week, we'll get your Super Bowl pick, and it better be the Eagles. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, John.
Enjoy Lincoln. Thanks. Good to see you.
We've been speaking with John King, CNN chief national correspondent. Up next, we'll open the lines about a key economic indicator, the price of eggs. Donald Trump has yet to lower the price of eggs, and you would think he would have done that with all the other stuff he's done in the first 8 days. So what are you going to do to get by? Jim's eating more eggs than ever, apparently. I witnessed that myself this morning. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In the 1960s, the Navy built undersea habitats hundreds of feet below the surface and sent aquanauts down for a look.
None of this had ever been done before. We all felt like we were the lab rats, but we were all young and thought we were invincible.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly, the forgotten history of the Sea Lab project on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Explo. From comedy to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline February 15th. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan is out. She's not feeling great, but she's feeling a lot better. She'll be Zooming in tomorrow, not physically here, but she'll be part of the show Zooming in. Andrea Cabral, kind enough to fill in today. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You know, we tackled this philosophical topic earlier in the show. How much does your life have to change for the worse before you jump into action vis-a-vis this new Trump administration? For the rest of the show, we're going to narrow in on one important economic indicator, the price of eggs. Are you shelling out $12 for those free-range, organic-fed, every hen has a name eggs, or sticking to the more for your dollar model of some grocery stores? Or are you changing your egg behavior altogether, skipping the eggs completely in favor of creative alternatives like applesauce in cakes? Our number is 877-301-8970. The egg and you, are they all that they're, thank you very much, cracked up to be? Call or text. And we should provide a little context. We learned this morning, I had a 3-egg egg foo young that I made this morning and a hard-boiled egg. You have not eaten an egg in 10 years. Is that right?
Oh, it's more than 10 years.
How long?
Haven't since I was a teenager.
And why?
I really just don't like eggs. I mean,
In any way?
I don't like, if people say I'm going to have eggs for breakfast or I'll have an egg, I do not eat eggs like that. Clearly they're in cakes or they're in, things that other foods that you make, but I do not partake of the singular egg.
Wow, that's a bold statement on your part.
Yeah, I get my protein, through meat or something else.
I got it.
But we're going to delight everybody with two pieces of sound that are on completely different ends of the spectrum, by the way. First, we're going to hear some egg-related wisdom from the much-beloved, late, great, fellow GBH star, Julia Child.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. You know, the egg can be your best friend if you just give it the right break.
Thank you very much.
The Julia Child humor.
She nailed it, yeah.
Yeah, she totally nailed it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, here's some sound from Curb Your Enthusiasm's Larry David. He's testing a waitress's patience when he asks for breakfast after 11 o'clock, and then follows that up with a request that the chef cook some eggs that he brought from home.
Do me a favor, will you just ask?
I can ask.
Thank
I will.
You. And as long as you're asking, I brought my own eggs. Yeah. Could you give this to the chef?
You brought these from home?
Yes, because they're organic. The ones you have are full of antibiotics. They've done it for me before.
Okay, the chef knows that our eggs are not good enough for you.
Yeah.
And he knows that you like eating breakfast after 11.
Yeah.
Okay, I can deal with that. 877-301-8970. If you are not an Andrea, meaning you are an eggophile, are you changing your behavior because the price of eggs has gone up dramatically? The availability of eggs. Karen Marshall, who produces the morning news here, the morning show, sent us a picture of her Shaw's. I don't know where it's from. There are virtually no eggs there.
Oh, wow.
Virtually no eggs. That may be bird flu kind of thing, but if you remember, Donald Trump said, and I will quote, "I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one." It's obviously day 9. I assume everybody knew, maybe they didn't, that he couldn't do it. Egg prices are up fairly dramatically, unless you're a really good shopper like I am, and I'm still getting good deals. But do you change your behaviors if you're dedicated to the egg because the price is obscenely high in most cases, and because you really got to search around, a la Karen here, to find the egg that suits your purposes? I can't believe you don't eat eggs. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Judith G. from Framingham has texted us and says that, first of all, she buys free-range eggs. She said the price is about $7-ish. I assume that's a dozen. She also took note of the fact that Trump has been in office for 8 days and the price of gas is going up. Another anonymous texter said eggs are $3 a dozen at Market Basket and Trader Joe's.
Actually, I got 18 large brown for $3.99 the other day. So you can shop selectively. And by the way, let me just be clear, because I'm sure we're going to get calls or texts to this effect. Give Trump a break. He's only been there 9 days. I didn't say I'm going to bring prices down on day one. He didn't say I'll bring them down as fast as I can. He said I'll bring them down on day one, and he hasn't brought them down on day one. If you want to comment on that, it's fine. But more importantly, if you want to comment on your relationship with the egg, assuming you're not, and if you were in Andrea's camp, I've never known anybody who's not allergic to eggs who doesn't do eggs. I'm just not
a fan of eggs, and I understand. Yeah, my father ate them a lot. I mean, he was a huge fan of eggs, and it's probably because we had them so frequently when I was growing up. They were definitely a breakfast staple.
I love egg salad. I like hard-boiled eggs and tuna salad.
Oh, please.
I like egg foo young, which I had this morning. I love a good hard-boiled egg. I love a good soft-boiled egg.
I would burn my house down before I would eat egg salad.
I love every kind of. And by the way, I have something to announce here. The other day when you were not here, we did a whole segment, which was an extraordinarily high-quality segment, about the best way to crack the shells on your egg without all the difficulty there is. And people came in, there were a million suggestions. Everybody was really confident they had the right idea. The day after we did this, totally coincidentally, I got an email from Bon Appetit, which was not because they were listening to the show, and I did what they suggested. And for those who are still in a big conundrum about this, it worked unbelievably perfectly. You boil the water before you put the egg in it, which I've never done. I always have the eggs in there to begin with. Boil the water. You then gently lower the eggs with like a scoop kind of thing into the boiling water. You time it perfectly for 10 minutes, not if you want a hard-boiled egg. You then immediately put it for 3 minutes. I said 3 minutes in an ice bath. And as soon as it's spent 3 minutes, and look at you looking at me, in an ice bath, you peel it under running water. I peeled 6 eggs 2 days ago. Not a chunk of an egg came out with the shell. It like slipped off the egg, and it was one of the happiest times I've ever had. So,
the competition is really stiff, but I genuinely don't believe I've ever been less interested in something that you've said in my entire life.
Well, I mean, okay, so you don't eat eggs, but can you not appreciate the art of the moment, the joy of...
Yes,
no,
I can appreciate.
I
can appreciate the technique, and I hope that there were tons of people out there that equally appreciated as you did.
I invited the whole neighborhood over actually when I peeled the egg. And by the way, and I'm not exaggerating, it was perfect. There was not it was like one crack. You just tap it, put it under the running water. You're still really into this.
It's right up there with Wheels on Luggage. It's fabulous.
By the way, Wheels on Luggage we're doing tomorrow at
really?
1:30, so that's perfect.
All right, I'll have to tune in.
877-301-8970. Let's go to Concord to start with Jane. Hello. Hi, there, Jane. We're talking about eggs.
Hi.
Hi.
I love eggs.
Well, that's good to hear. So do I. What's going on?
But I haven't been eating eggs for a long time. We stopped buying them when they did get more expensive and just steered away from them. But I think they are really healthy. And Jim, you mentioned not long ago that you eat egg white omelets, but eating the yolks is the real nutrition part of the egg.
Well, actually,
so
what I do...
you to eat the whole egg.
I know that what I do is so that you can balance what you just said, the nutrition and the cholesterol thing. When I do a 3-egg thing, like I did with egg foo young this morning, look at Andrea, 3 egg whites and 1 egg yolk. So I sort of dip my foot into your world, but at the same time, not too much cholesterol problem. That's okay, right, Jane?
Well, cholesterol is in all the animal foods, and our bodies make it, so there's really no reason to avoid. I don't believe in avoiding cholesterol in general, but certainly not in egg yolks. And the other thing people don't remember is that with avian flu and a lot of chickens were killed over the last several years, that the price of eggs went up, and that became an election issue.
Yeah, but Donald
So
Trump...
we need to deindustrialize egg production, I guess.
Okay, well, you sound like you're an egg expert. Thank you very much for the call. Zoe, our coworker, just said, are you getting chickens at your house? Is that really true? Jamie, that is. You're getting chickens. And
good.
Why? What do you mean good? Why are you doing that? I'm just curious. As pets or what? Why are we getting them? Jamie's not making eye contact because he's humiliated. Why are you doing that? I've not had enough to do, so I need more things to do, says Jamie. Well, that's great. He's getting chickens at his house. 877. How many people in the audience have chickens in their house? Anybody here?
I don't think
Exactly.
so.
Nobody,
Yeah.
Jamie. Okay. Where do you want to go next?
We can go to Joan in Medford, and then I'm going to tell people that there are lots of good alternatives to eggs if they don't want to
I'm
pay
dying
those
to hear what
prices.
they are. Okay.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Long time, first time.
We love those two things. Go ahead.
Okay, I just came from Costco in Everett,
Yeah.
and they got their egg delivery in this morning, and they had a room full of eggs. And the woman checking out in front of me had, I think, 90 cartons. and I think it was for a store, for a restaurant. And the woman stocking the eggs said to me, they'll all be gone by noon. And there was a room full of them, Costco.
Oh, we do.
And so there's a run on eggs today at Costco in Everett.
Let me tell you something, Joan. Talking about, one of my coworkers said a thought experiment. Is there any food item that Jim doesn't wax poetic about? Let me tell you, my younger daughter and I went to Costco on Saturday, and we went right to the front and got the $1.50 huge hot dog and a drink. I had a seltzer. She had a Diet Pepsi. That's living, Joan. Let me tell you, it was fabulous. Thanks for bringing Costco into the conversation. Now, we have a text from somebody who used to own a former restaurant in town, Curry from Pigalle. And she says, I love hearing Jim wax poetic about eggs. I'm a fan too. Now, I met Curry, and after, unfortunately, Pigalle had closed. And do you know what Curry told me? I hope I get this right. And Curry, if I'm wrong, please text back right away. Do you know what their bar snack was? When you're sitting at the bar having a drink, you have a peanut, whatever. Guess what their bar snack was at Pigalle? Bacon. Strips of
you can't go
bacon
wrong.
sitting on the
Yeah, you can't
bar
go wrong.
at the restaurant. Oh, my God. In any case, 877-301-8970. Kelly in Rhode Island wants my egg foo young recipe, which is really extraordinary, and the sauce is great. Can we put it online or something later, or what do we do?
If not, I'm sure you'll go
Jamie,
and
when
make
you're
her
not
some
raising
for
the
her.
chickens, if you can post it online, we'd really appreciate it. I can't, don't type things I cannot read on the air, because I might read them by mistake and have real problems. So let's not do that. Where do you want to go?
Erin from Jamaica Plain.
Hello,
Hi, Erin. How's
Hi,
Jamaica
Erin.
Plain?
Hi, Erin.
Hey there. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that I actually texted you the other day about your eggs, about Kenji's method, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But I actually hate eggs.
Great.
But,
Good for you, Erin.
I love to make them because I think they're an absolutely magic food. Because they do so many things, and my wife, it's her favorite food, so I make them almost every day for her.
Why do you hate them, Erin?
I keep trying them in every single form, and I just do not like them.
Yeah, they're just kind of yucky.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
I'll have it in a cake, but
Has this
nothing else.
Has this been a source of conflict between you and your wife? I assume on many an occasion, or no? No.
No, I do all the cooking, so she doesn't really care.
She's okay.
But I also cook for a vegan family. So on the other spectrum of that, I have to learn new ways to bind things, like with aquafaba, which is chickpea juice.
Oh, my God.
Or
that's in
chia.
this. Erin, that's in this article.
Chickpea juice?
There's this article. It's in CNET.
Don't go away, Erin.
It's on CNET.com,
What
and
is
it's alternatives because egg prices are ridiculously high. And they actually tell you, it depends on what you want the egg for. Do you want it for leavening? Do you want it for emulsification or binding, providing protein? And then they have egg substitutes. And aquafaba is mentioned here. It's called, the specific dish is olive oil brioche with aquafaba. There's a 3-ingredient aquafaba chocolate mousse. So, Erin, tell people what aquafaba is. It sounds weird because it's chickpeas. But
yeah, so when you open up a can of chickpeas and you drain it, you just save that liquid.
Oh.
And then you want to kind of double strain it, and you can
then throw it out
sort of
after
make
you
an egg
double
white out of
strain.
it. No, seriously, actually, a lot of bars lately are using it for, if you get an egg white kind of drink, they'll use aquafaba so that it's vegan friendly.
The guy who pounds
learn something every
liverwurst
day.
in wee fistfuls is turning up his nose at aquafaba.
By the way, I do not, Erin, that was a fabulous call. Thank you for making it. I do not pound. I get a tube of liverwurst. I put a little hole in the end with a knife or a pair of scissors, and I squeeze the liverwurst right in there. Yeah. Tell me you've never done that.
No, I have never. I think I've had liverwurst once in my life, and I didn't like it, so I've never had it since.
How long ago was that?
Oh, years.
And
years
let me guess that when you had it, you did not cut a little hole in the end and just squeeze it right in there. Did you do that?
I don't think the method of delivery makes that much of a difference.
Trust me, the method of delivery, as you call it, is huge when it comes to consumption of liverwurst. Rodrigo in D.C. is upset with me. He says, I'm ashamed of Jim that he said egg expert and passed on the opportunity to say expert, which is really something that I'm a little ashamed about, too.
He has a point.
Well, I am an egg expert. Thank you, Rodrigo, for pointing that out. Thank you very much.
Esther in Beverly, good for you, Esther. Esther says, Andrea, I don't care for eggs either, but how about flan or creme brulee? Yeah, I do eat things with eggs in it, even things that have enough egg in it that there's sort of an eggy taste. I don't have necessarily...
Like what? What is an eggy taste?
French toast sometimes has an eggy taste.
Oh, it does. That's fair.
That doesn't bother me at all.
No, it doesn't bother
But
you.
stuff like a creme brulee or a flan, I can deal with that. That's fine.
By the way, if there's that, we have a lot of calls, but if anybody is somebody who not only likes liverwurst, but has squeezed it out of the end of the tube into their mouth, if you can tell who's ever screening the calls.
Please don't call
and
if
we'll
you've
put you
done that.
next on the, there apparently, someone just said there are audible groans in the control room, to which I say politely, get over it. Now, here is Sean in Fall River.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean. What's up?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on?
So I'm here. I work in the store.
Yeah.
I order.
You order eggs?
Yes, sir.
For the store,
and
okay.
It's all based off of days that we can order it and like what's available.
And how much is the price up, let's say, in the last, 3 or 6 months there, Sean?
It's maintained. It may have grown a little bit, but at the same time, it's maintained at this point.
Oh, it is.
You obviously have to pick and choose where you have to go, but honestly, that's the whole thing about the economy right there is you pick and choose the best prices where you have to go. For us, like, it's a 50-50. Like, we get in on certain days based off of what we order.
Yeah. I got it. We have a bad connection. I'll let you go, but that was helpful. I mean, you got to be selective. You got to, as I said, there are great deals at Walmart. And Susan from Waltham makes a fabulous point. We've spoken about this. Speaking of Costco, as that caller was, they're standing up for DEI, which they are boldly.
Yes.
So please buy your eggs. And they treat their workers well, too. So in addition to that, so please buy your eggs and everything there. Well, that's actually a good thing to do. You should reward people that do things, companies that do things that you respect, and avoid those who don't.
I mean, the price of eggs in certain places is high, but a lot of this was fueled by all of the stuff that J.D. Vance was saying during the run-up to the election, claiming that, holding up a dozen eggs and saying that they were $24 when the sign, he was in a supermarket, the sign behind him showed that they were 2 dozen eggs for that whatever the exorbitant amount was, and he was trying to say it was 1 dozen eggs. But a lot of it was fueled by that sort of lying to the public about it. But they are expensive in some places.
Can we go back to your original? What's your favorite food? We know it's not eggs. What's your favorite food?
Oh, wow. That's kind of hard.
Well, pick one. One of your favorite foods.
I'm a carnivore, so different kinds of meat cooked different ways. Yeah.
The price of eggs has gone up, I read this morning, I think in the Wall Street Journal, 37% on average in the last 12 months. If the price of your favorite meat went up 7%, and meat is obviously pretty expensive to begin with. Would that in any way deter your consumption or purchase, or no?
Oh, I'm sure it would.
It would.
Not even so much because of the question of do I want to spend the money for it? I probably do want to spend the money for it, but it would be the principle of the thing. If meat prices went up because I was being gouged by a handful of companies that control the meat market, then you stop doing it. It's the only way to force them to bring prices down. And Kamala Harris talked about this in the run-up to the election. She was trying to get companies to stop gouging and putting legislation on the table for that. That's what's really, a lot of the cost of things is because a handful of companies control the prices. Cereal is a great example. A handful of companies control cereal prices, and that's why you're paying $4 and $5 for 13 ounces of a box of cereal.
I agree with you. Here's Ellen in Boston texting saying, have you heard of egg porn? Egg porn following on social media. It's a thing for folks who lust after cooked eggs. Here's an example.
What?
Well, I guess some people get turned on by that. I mean, it's fairly attractive.
That's
I know you don't
sad.
like eggs, but it is. Gene and Newton, you're next on Boston Public Radio with
Hi,
me
Gene.
and Andrea Cabral. Hi.
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 Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
I'm not sure how to turn this off.
No, it's fine. We're good.
Oh, okay. So, liverwurst.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, me too.
My father was from Philadelphia.
Oh, I love that.
And, and we had liverwurst sandwiches, during the week for school.
Great.
One thing my mother used to do was she made an appetizer with liverwurst.
Oh, my God. What was the appetizer?
And she mashed it up with mayo, and then she spread it on crackers, and then put a little slice of a green olive on top.
Oh, God, I wish I knew your mother. To die for. Now, let me ask you, Gene, did your father, because Andrea is appalled by this, did your father ever cut an end off of these liverwurst and squeeze it into his mouth? Was that his method of delivery or not? No?
I'm sorry to say, no.
Oh, well, that's horrible. Well, I'm glad the family, including you, enjoyed it. Gene, thank you very much for the call. Let me just tell you this. Toast, liverwurst, Swiss cheese, red onion, Dijon mustard, to quote that caller, to die for. To die for. Thank you. Let's go to Jane in Waltham. You're next. We're talking about eggs, the price of eggs,
Hi,
the politics of
good
eggs, whatever. Go ahead. Hello. Hi.
Hello. I listen every day. Thanks for the show. I hope Marjorie feels better.
She's getting there.
And,
Thank you. I'll tell her. Go ahead.
Yeah. And back to the eggs. Egg gouging. Just a week or so ago, I bought my eggs at Hannaford's, $3.89. They were actually second week in a row 10 cents less than they usually were. And then I was at Whole Foods the other day for some other things.
Yeah.
And I walked by the eggs and I saw the exact same eggs, and they had loads of them, the exact same brand, very good brand, and they were $5.79 for the same eggs.
It's unbelievable.
And I said to a gentleman there, I said, if they were 10 or 20 cents more, because it's Whole Foods, and I said, but almost $2 more, the same week. There's something wrong about that. So,
well, you sound like an investigative reporter, Jane, to me. That was excellent work. I think you made a very good point. Thank you for calling. An anonymous texter says, I have a tube of liverwurst in the meat drawer. Jim is my enabler. You are welcome, anonymous texter. Thank you very much. 877-301-8970. One person answered our question about whether or not you're avoiding or changing your egg behavior.
No, I think they may be eating fewer, but I don't think people have stopped eating them.
That's probably true, yeah.
Let's talk to Gary, who's in the car.
Hello, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
What's up?
How are we doing, Jim?
Excellent.
Listen, I'm a disabled combat veteran, 32 years active duty, serving since 1968. I've eaten eggs because in the Army, you eat what they give you.
I'm told that's true.
I love over-easy eggs, any kind of eggs except hard-boiled. My wife makes them. We've been married 53 years. I hate her hard-boiled eggs. I hate a lot of things about her. We had 2 good years and 51 years of hell. I'm just coming from my VA appointment where I've seen my psychiatrist. He talks to me on a regular basis to keep me from killing somebody.
Okay, Gary, we got to leave it. I think Gary is a good point to probably leave it. I would keep seeing him, and I wish you luck. And Your wife should probably call and give her her side of this 51 out of 53 years.
Or call 911.
Thank you. Or probably, yeah, I would stop with the threat things there.
Yeah, that's
okay,
not
Gary,
good.
thank you for the call anywhere. A WR from the South End said, too many existential crises.
That's
pretty
actually
good. No,
pretty
that's
good given
Even though
what's
you don't
going
like
on in the
eggs,
world.
that's good, right?
But what's going on in the world as well. It's pretty good fun.
Where do you want to go next? Where do you want us to go next?
Well, some of our texters, we've got some really good texts.
Please.
One texter says, I've been buying pasture-raised eggs. I don't even know where you find those for about 15 years.
Oh, they have them at the stores.
Oh, okay, because it's most humane for the chickens.
Yeah.
15 years ago, and I remember this movie. This texter says they saw the movie Food Inc. about unsanitary and inhumane chicken farms. The pasture-raised cost a little bit more, but this person makes up the difference that they pay for the eggs by making their own coffee rather than buying it at a cafe. So the $3 difference, they make their own coffee. They don't buy it at a cafe, but they pay more for the pasteurized
I understand
eggs.
that. John in Beverly says, Jim, Dickies and liverwurst will be what you're remembered for. What a legacy. I'm pretty proud of that, actually. Yeah, Dickies and liverwurst.
Oh, yeah.
Let's squeeze Aurora in Newport, Rhode Island in. You have 1 minute, Aurora. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Okay.
Okay.
So, hi, Jim. So I was going to make my fabulous deviled egg recipe for the weekend for appetizers.
What happened?
But I don't think I'm going to make them.
Why?
They're not expensive, but will people want to eat them? Are we playing like Russian roulette with avian flu?
No, I think we should have said that earlier. I think all the evidence that I've read a lot about it, not that I'm an expert, is that we're fine. That they are, the government, is dysfunctional as is at the moment, is making sure that infected birds are being killed, unfortunately.
Taken care
and I
of.
don't think there's a threat in this supermarket. So read up yourself, but I think we're safe. Aurora, thank you. Send a deviled egg over if you have a little bit of time. Thank you.
Good suggestion
very
from one
much.
of our texters to check out Bob's Red Mill because they sell an egg replacer.
They do?
In a powdered form, yeah. Bob's Red Mill is actually pretty good, especially
They
for
have great
gluten-free
stuff, yeah.
But yeah, so if you want an egg replacer, Bob's Red Mill is one. And you can get that on sale at Trader Joe's. Get it in bulk in places like Job Lot. Not bad.
By the way, an anonymous texter says, the further we get into this presidency, the more I hear Jim talking about eggs. I'm concerned for him over the next 4 years. I share your concern for him. Hey, Jared, do you eat eggs? I can't remember. Jared Bowen is joining us. Do you eat eggs?
I'm so sorry to answer this because Andrea and I usually have incredible unity, but I love eggs. I love poached eggs, scrambled eggs, deviled eggs, egg salad sandwiches. Do you have poached pods? Poached pods. They're my favorite thing.
The little round rings.
Yeah, the silicone ones. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
No. They're not. They're a pod, and you just put a little olive oil in, then you get the perfect poached egg. They're fabulous.
What do you put it in boiling water?
Put it in boiling water for 4.5 minutes.
By the way, did Shirely, I think Shirely Leung texted you and me both about the battery daddy this morning. She sent a picture of her battery daddy.
As soon as I got, I got my phone out and saw the battery daddy, which was quite robust, and it had other features on it. It was very exciting.
Do you know what a battery daddy is?
No.
If you have a junk drawer, we talked about junk drawers. You have a lot of crap around the house. A battery daddy is like a suitcase with little individual slots for different. It's a battery daddy.
I didn't know that's what it was called.
And Jared thought it was his daddy. So it was a very odd conversation. What are you doing?
Andrew, you need a daddy. That's what the whole lesson was. Everybody needs a daddy.
Okay, fine. Let's leave it at that. What are you doing at 2 o'clock, which is exactly when the show starts? Hi.
We're going to be talking to Jordan Cooper, who at 27 was the youngest black playwright ever produced on Broadway. He has a show, Ain't No Mo, that's on the Speakeasy Stage Company with Front Porch Arts Collective, and it's hilariously told about a poignant subject matter. What if every single African American in this country got on a plane and left? That is the whole through line of his show. So we'll talk to him about that. We'll preview the Something in the Way Fest happening right down the street from us here at GBH at Roadrunner. And then Imani Perry is here with her new book, Black in Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People. It's a fascinating read about the color blue, how it's woven through African American history and culture.
What a hell of a show you've got. That's a great show.
Jared, Google Day of Absence. It's a play written by one of the Harlem Renaissance writers. I can't remember which one, but you can ask your guest about Day of Absence because it's almost a precursor to what you just said.
I'm writing it down right now. Thank you.
Jared, see you tomorrow. Thanks.
See you,
Listen to
Jared.
Jared and his